All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, this is just the awkward silence where people test whether their AV is working and everything like that. So feel free to, if you're not paying attention, turn your camera off and wander off and take a break. Or if you want to join in the beta testing, hang around.
Hey Ben, hi everyone.
Hi there, hi Rolf.
Sort of like was just expecting you to see here, Ben, but quite a few people already logged on.
I know they're keen as. It's I'm taking that as a good thing.
Yes.
So one bit I'm just going to try and do is make sure that my slides project properly.
Hey Laura, how are you?
Hello, how are you guys?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess can't wait for Christmas, huh?
Yeah, it's not long. I can't believe nearly end of November. The year's just gone so fast. It's just crazy.
But when do you guys shut down? Probably, huh?
Christmas to New Year, yes, and then back 4th of January, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. But now that restrictions are easing, it's sort of tempting to take a bit of a longer break to make up for all the lost time in the year.
That's true. Yeah, Monish is also asking me to take leave because I think you can only roll over 30 days, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know if anyone else in the first session wants to just check that they got the screen sharing powers they need to be able to put their slides up, or if they're all Zoom experts and completely confident.
I'm not, so I might give it a try to see what I'm sharing, but
Because I always have that paranoia that you share the wrong half of the
yeah, and it's like, oh, that's boring. But no, I'm not even sure what I'm sharing. This
that looks perfect to me.
There's something. Stop share. Yep.
I can, yeah, I might share mine as well and just make sure.
I think my test is as well, but
Wrong one.
Prize for the messiest desktop there.
It's pretty messy. I must apologize. Yep. I think is that projecting okay?
perfect.
Yep, that looks
Yep.
good to me.
Okay, cool. All good.
Yeah.
Try
It
to
does remind me now that one of the things that was on my to-do list was to write a set of slides just for to have the program up during the introduction, but that hasn't happened. But hopefully everyone's got the program.
Is working as well?
Email.
This is working okay, Ben?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So did this meeting happen online again last year, or is it?
No, I mean, this is sort of like the 2022 version, so because the next one is not before 2023. The last meeting was actually in February this year, alongside Lawn, but we wanted to attach it. So this is actually being a satellite meeting to Ensmith that is happening. Yep. I think it starts tomorrow, Adam, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, so this is
Yeah,
meant to be a
Sunday.
satellite of Ansmus.
Ansbeth starts on Sunday. Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows? This could have been in Canberra, but unfortunately, COVID managed to get in the way of that.
Yeah, we got an email about a week ago saying that we'll be allowed to have conferences, like in-person conferences again, on the 26th, which is the day after Ansmus is finishing. We had no way of knowing that back in the day. So yeah,
At least
it's unfortunate, but it seems to have worked out okay.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for these ones, we get more people to the virtual ones than we do to the in the flesh, because obviously not everyone has the time to go to well, we always try and do it as a satellite to other conferences. And so yeah, this virtual one works well.
Yeah, it's cheap and easy and accessible.
So did you get a good turnout at Ansmus, Adam?
Yeah, we pretty much, you know, I was really worried when the big outbreak happened and we had to change everything from in person to virtual, that, you know, it might just end up being a financial disaster. But we've got pretty close to break even now. I think we're just a small loss, but yeah, we've got over 100 delegates now, which is pretty typical sort of, you know, Ansmus attendance, 100 to 150 people. And we've got a great program, which is all you can hope for, really. It's a good program and you know, not lose a lot of money.
That's always nice.
Yeah, it's not. Ansmus has never been about trying to make money. So you know, if you get pretty close to breaking even, that's about as yeah, that's ideal, really. So,
yeah. You don't want to go down in history as the one who bankrupted the society.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I was worried about. I was seriously worried about that, but it's all worked out. So looking forward to it. And the virtual conference platform on air looks really good. You know, it's just like a conference, except any beers that you get given will be digital little icons of beers. That's the main difference.
Yeah, so have they managed to work out a way of trying to let people have those chance conversations? That's, you know, for me, the joy of a conference.
Yeah, that's right. I think, yeah, there's plenty of ways to interact between delegates through the system. So if you can click on somebody and say, hey, let's have a chat, and it facilitates that kind of interactivity. So it's possible, yeah. But we haven't allocated much time other than, you know, lunch breaks and stuff, where most of it's just jam-packed full of presentations. So, you know, but it's a good, you can still network and interact with the trade displays and things like that. But it's not the same as when you're in person and you've got, you know, you got the full body language and everything.
Hopefully next year, or when's the next Ansmus? It's in 2 years, right?
It's every 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where that one's going to be yet. I guess we'll probably discuss that this week. But yeah, I don't think we'll try and have it in Canberra. Bad enough for 1 decade, I think.
I was just about to say, are there any volunteers?
Yeah.
We haven't assigned the next place yet.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's more of a process of people being tapped on the shoulder and said, "You're going to be doing it." Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's the slowest at staring at the ground when that question goes around? I was hearing a rumor that it might be, is there a big international conference that it might sink in with for the next one?
Yeah, we've secured the IMSC for 2024, so that will be in Melbourne. I guess it's to be decided whether or not we tie in Ansmus. We'll still have Ansmus in 23 and then the international meeting 24. That's going to be, I guess, discussed at the AGM coming up.
Yeah, fun discussions. I remember the APS always has a similar discussion each time they land HUPO. And amazingly, they always get, you kind of worry that people get conference fatigue, but you actually get an uptick in numbers. The international one sort of acts as a advertising for the local one.
Yeah, right. Might depend if we can get someone to volunteer though for the 23.
It's time to exit.
Yeah, I mean the argument that it should be in Canberra this time around was pretty strong. I hadn't been here for about 20 years or something, so it's like pretty hard to argue with that.
I always thought the most difficult decision APS has to make is always whether Mantra or Cumberland.
Actually, the Cumberland are no longer holding conferences there
Yeah,
anymore.
I know. I'm a bit sad about that. I really like the Cumberland, to be honest.
Yeah. So it's back to Mantra for the foreseeable future.
Going to be a change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought the committee was hard against never going back there after us getting shafted for the medical conferences. I thought it was like never a hell of high earth.
Well, I guess they don't have an option, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say a tent on a beach.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're holding again the isn't this again the hub model, right? You have different hubs in one, I don't know, Sydney, Adelaide, or something like that.
No, but just one in-person conference
Really?
in Lawn, and there's a virtual component, so people can join virtually, but everyone's hopefully be able to come to Lawn, given all the restrictions are easing now.
Oh, that's
So,
great. I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be good.
Well, it's certainly looking like our fun police are actually might let us travel again. So fingers crossed, I'll be able to make it down to Lawn.
Mm.
Yeah, I just heard that the accommodation Mantra is already pretty full. So if you haven't registered yet or booked an accommodation, rather do it quickly, unless you want to go somewhere in a house or something.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, as always, I always end up somewhere at the top of the hill, miles out of town, because I leave it too late.
Yeah.
We did stay in we took a swag and a tent, stayed down at the there's a little camping spot down. It's 10-minute walk or something to the main settlement. That was nice. It's good.
Yeah, you guys from Weehai, don't you? I mean, you always book an entire house, isn't it?
Yeah, we booked a house, so we're set. It's not too far from the conference venue, so that's good. I personally won't be able to attend in person, but I'll be attending virtually because I'm going to be delivering the week after. I'm due to have a baby in the next week after Lawn, so I won't be able to come this year, next year, sorry.
That's
But
fair enough.
it's just bad timing, I guess. So
wasn't it like for your first baby, wasn't it like similar? Oh, no, but you showed up, or wasn't it?
Yeah, I came, she was born in December and
Yeah, exactly.
I came in February, yeah. Probably a bit soon, but yeah, they're still good. Still good.
Nice. Okay, so 2 more minutes, and then maybe we can kick it off.
Actually, I was just thinking, Ralph, we're going to try and encourage people to have cameras on during the session, or let people lurk in the background.
You can try.
I was just eating my lunch. I didn't think anyone wanted to see that. So
I'm just going to take a screenshot of my face now and just leave it there for the rest of the time.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. A little video loop where you're just kind of nodding sagely.
Yeah, just nod my head. That's it.
I just leave mine off to save bandwidth.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Yes, so Ben, are you recording it? So you're the one recording, I guess?
I'm hoping my sidekick Alex is the one recording it.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I think it's you recording, Ben.
All right. Well, in that case, yes, I'm recording.
Yeah, I think it looks like it's, yeah, I think so.
I'm glad you're paying attention at least.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe let's give everyone maybe another minute or two, a bit of grace period. But how many registrants did you say? Was like nearly 50, Ben? So we are already nearly 40, so that's actually pretty good.
Yep.
Okay, look, I think it's 1:01. I think it's a good time to just officially start the meeting. So first of all, so I mean, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth, I can't believe it, Australasian Core Facility meeting. Look, for those who don't know me, my name is Ralph Skittenhelm, and I'm the director of the Proteomics and Metabolomics facility at Monash University. And first of all, a big shout out to every one of you. It's thank you so much for attending. It's really great. And you know, as Ben said this morning and by email, you know, we have nearly 50 registrants, and you know, compared to 2019 when we had the first Australasian Core Facility meeting, where I think we nearly had 30 maybe. So I know we nearly doubled the number of registrants within 2 years. So, and it's just absolutely fantastic, and just, you know, really shows that there's an appetite, you know, within the community just to have those meetings and to bring people together. So just skimming through the participants list, you know, I mean, of course, you know, most of us, you know each other, but there are also a few new names. So just let me set the scene a little bit for the Australasian Core Facility meeting. So as I said, so the Australasian Core Facility meeting was inaugurated in 2019 alongside the UPO World Conference in Adelaide. And really what the goal of the ACF is really to bring together, you know, leaders, expert users that work in or with core facility management at this point in time, mass spectrometric core facilities. And really just, you know, like I think Ben and I, we realized, you know, everyone is in agreement that, you know, despite we all might run different models, you know, somebody might have subscription based, someone might run a facility on a per sample based model. But at the end of the day, I think we all have, you know, the exact same headaches, you know, being like, how do we modernize our instrumentation? You know, how do we attract staff? How do we keep staff? You know, how much do we charge? You know, how can we increase the quality for users? And I think, you know, coming from Europe, I think this was a bit of a surprise that the mass spec facilities didn't really engage on a regular level in Australia. And so I think, you know, Ben and I, we just thought, well, why don't we kick this off? And yes, it's just great to see that so many people are interested in this. And as I said, the goal is to discuss ideas, to, you know, share best practice approaches, but also to explore ways how to foster collaborations within facility and how to tackle the challenges of running core facilities. And well, so to that end, what we've come up with this year is I think another really exciting program. So we have, as usual, 3 sessions. Each of the session is running approximately for 1 hour with a 10-minute break, so you can get, you know, a glass of water or checking your emails. The first session is going to be, you know, like, I mean, Ben is always naming these sessions. The first session is when is a facility not a facility, and we have Evelyn Mays and Laura Deckley speaking in that session. Then we have in the second session, we have Johan Gustafsson and Jeff Christensen from Australian Biocommons, and they will talk about Australian Biocommons. And because I think, you know, Australian Biocommons has a very, very similar mission to the Australian Core Facility meeting, and, you know, super exciting to hear about what they have to offer in the bioinformatics space. And last but not least, I mean, the third session is when Ben and I are going to talk about the latest survey we have conducted, and also the multi-center testing initiative what's going on there. So before I hand over to Ben, who's going to chair the first session, just a few housekeeping things. I mean, I guess preaching to the choir. We've all attended may too many Zoom meetings over the last couple of years. But please, try to mute yourselves when you're not speaking. It really helps reducing the background. And if you have questions, either raise your virtual hand and talk to us, which would be the preferred way. Or, if you're not very keen, on speaking up, you can also type your question in the chat, and Ben and I will monitor the chat and then ask the question on your behalf. And so, look, without any further ado, really, I want to hand over to Ben, who's going to chair the first session. I think Ben needs no introduction, but nonetheless, so Ben Crossett he's the manager of the core facility at the University of Sydney. In addition, he's also the co-chair and co-founder of the Australasian core facility meetings. And so, so Ben, over to you, and thanks so much for putting so much time and effort into making these meeting series happen. That's really appreciated. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ralph. And it's a team effort, like everything. And thank you very much for your contributions as well in helping make these meetings happen. So, in case you're wondering where did this session come about, when I was sending out the survey requests earlier this year, a surprisingly common reply I got back was, "Oh, thank you very much for the survey, but really we're not a core facility." And I would generally pester these people and say, well, but you provide mass spectrometry services to other researchers, and even though you might not think you're a core facility, that's fundamentally what we're all doing. And so to try and dig into this I'm not a facility honest approach, I thought it'd be great if we could get two examples of facilities that might not fit that classic university core facility model. So without any further ado, we're going to initially jump over to Evelyn Mays, who's the proteomics platform leader and senior scientist with Ag Research in Lincoln. So she previously did her PhD and postdoctoral research over in Belgium, focusing on clinical proteomics, but since moving to New Zealand, she's focusing on the application of proteomics to food science and nutrition, as well as trying to drive methodological innovations in the agri-tech proteomics field. So whilst she focuses a lot on the endogenous peptides across the food chain, what we're hoping you're going to find out today is a little bit about how ag research works, and is the grass really greener in New Zealand? So over to you, Evelyn.
Thanks so much, Ben. Let me try sharing my screen again. Last time. It works again. Thanks very much for giving me the opportunity, or giving me the push to present today, because it definitely gives for me a few things to think about as well, because in all honesty, I definitely was one of the people that said, we are not a core facility. I'm not going to fill in this questionnaire. I cannot give any useful answers for this. It's also the first time that I'm attending this meeting. So if I'm completely out of scope, which I hope I'm not, but if I'm completely out of scope, please tell me so that next time when I come to the meeting, I'm a bit better prepared. So what I thought of doing today was first introducing Ag Research. So Ag Research is a Crown Research Institute in New Zealand, and has a major focus on agricultural science. We are partly funded by government, and we are tasked to partner with the pastoral sector to identify and deliver innovation to create and increase value for New Zealand, that all while enhancing the environment and land use. So that means that all the topics we have aim to deliver some new knowledge or some new technologies that underpin New Zealand pastoral agri-food and agri-technology value chain. The approach we take is quite from farm to fork. So there are scientists really working on developing the smartest, most sustainable farming systems, completely through scientists working on the most sought after food and bio-based products. So ag research has 5 major pillars where we work on, which are also the core centers of excellence. The first one is provenance. So where we really try to trace the journey of a product from where it's grown to where it's sold and really ensure whether or not the product is safe or the quality is good. Environmental impact research on soil, water, and nutrient management, but also pasture fertilization, and really improving the practices and reducing the environmental impact. Land use is another one where there's really trying to provide support for transition of the more traditional farming systems towards multifactorial land use. Climate change, so we're working a lot on developing some technologies to improve or to help agriculture transition to a future low carbon economy. And then the last one is future food, so really working on health benefits and creating new products with, for example, desirable flavors or different types of texture. And to do all that, ag research has a few omics platforms. So we are, proteomics is based in Lincoln near Christchurch. There's also a metabolomics platform in the same team in Christchurch. We have metabolomics as well in the North Island in Palmerston North. And we have genomics facilities in Invermay. And if I would think of a definition of a core facility, then for me, genomes is the only core facility in ag research, because it's really a separate entity and not really part of the research institute. So what ag research used to do for a long, long time is what are very well known for pastoral proteomics, which actually just means they're doing a lot of proteomics on meat, milk, wool, fibers. So they did for 10 years or so. More or less 99% of the samples that would come in would be one of these sample types. And it would also be quite standard questions on, can you check whether or not if we heat the milk, there's something changing in the proteins. So quite the same questions always coming back. A little bit, let's say 5 years ago or so, we had already some changes where there were some other approaches. Redox proteomics really on looking for modifications, mostly in the wool from sheep that are standing in the sun, and the wool gets a little bit yellow, and then finding out why it is and whether or not products can still made from it. And then a lot more on the health angle, really looking at, can we, if we eat food and we do a simulated digestion, which peptides are generated, and are they maybe having some bioactivity in there. So it's really clear for ag research that all the proteomics projects need to be in focus of what the scope is from the research institute. That is quite well controlled by government as well. So we have to fit it in. If there are projects, we have to fit it in, that it's in one way or another supporting the transformation of New Zealand's agri-food sector or farm systems. Luckily, and that makes it a lot more interesting, there's a lot of change happening in agriculture the last year. So there's a lot of change in projects as well. And yeah, we have a more extensive range on types of samples where someone wants to do some proteome analysis in. So it can be going from a lot of beans to insects to lots of bacteria, whether or not they use it for some type of fermentation, or it comes from the soil because they want to do some tests there. It's a lot more open. Even soil, we can just bags of soil. Can you measure some proteins in the soil? So it's quite diverse. We also really went to nutritional intervention studies, so some human samples there, but that can only be, clinical samples can only be there if people have eaten some food or it is in one way or another related to the transformation of the agri-food sector. Animal biomarker studies, and then the closest, I guess, to clinical where we get, where farm animals also get sick. So if you can find a biomarker for some cattle or some sheep, that is there. And then smart foods is a lot on, for example, projects where it's a gut-brain barrier and how we can influence that by food. So the structure of the platform is a lot more. We are in Lincoln, 3 capability platforms that are sitting together in one team. So we have proteomics, metabolomics, and microanalysis, which is microscopy, all in one team. We have 3 platform leaders. So I'm leading the proteomics. Maybe some of you know Alistair Ross, who is leading the metabolomics, and then we have Dwayne Harland leading microanalysis. And our platform leadership is really based on our technical expertise, so making decisions and trying to influence decisions based on our technical expertise as well as opportunity generation, while lots of the finance as well as the people part, that's someone that's our team lead or team manager looking after that. So if I would say, and looking at the proteomics platform, there are quite some things where we can influence or try to change things. And for example, if we look at the platform, we have some instruments. What we can say is, okay, does this meet the requirements to deliver good quality results? And then it works already a little bit different, I think, than in other facilities or labs where I've been. So ag research only allows ag research staff or PhD students that are associated with ag research to use the instrument. So even if someone would come over and is better in using instruments than I would be, we are not allowed to let these people using the instruments. Timeframes and expectations is already, because we're a research institute and lots of people doing lots of different things, we typically don't have the turnaround of 1 week or 2 weeks. We're mostly talking a few months, which might also be different than what a maybe more typical core facility can do. If we look at the questions that come, we are almost asked to only do projects where proteomics is only a really small piece of the puzzle. But we have changed it a little bit, and we also have what we call proteomics services, which are very small projects where most often it's just focused on some protein identification. And then if we name it well, then it can still be approved. Reason, for example, why we added these proteomics services is because some researchers in Christchurch Hospital were interested in just an identification of one protein, and in theory, we should say, no, we cannot do it, send your sample somewhere else across New Zealand, even though they're just a few kilometers from where we are. So that that's really to try to facilitate things, but it really needs to be very, very small projects from just measuring a few samples, and it will also not be prioritized and can only be measured when all the other projects are done. So project-based, we have research-led and industry-led. So industry-led is a lot more commercially sensitive projects. So there's a lot more claim substantiation. So people just want to know, is my product better than anyone else? Can we make a food claim saying this product from New Zealand is the best in the world because we can detect this and this and this? So that's a completely different approach than the research-led program, where there's mostly some bigger research programs on bigger questions, where sometimes it can just be where people are interested in what are the proteins doing, or we are interested in this type of modifications. But typically, these projects are where proteomics is just one small component, and we require more systems biology approach. So if I would say of the operating model on projects, what we typically do is the client asks the question, and we are trying to find out what he actually, or he or she actually wants by really a team of science experts. That means that there's always someone, for example, in that meeting that has the knowledge in some mass spec or proteomics. There will always be someone bioinformatics related, and then we have really the science experts in the type of sample it is. If it's milk, then here I am again sharing always the same thing. If it's milk, then we get some of the scientists who are working 20 plus years in milk. Also in that discussion, just to be 100% sure that we can deliver the science that, or the science question that they want to ask. Commercial projects are a little bit different in that sense that we definitely will have someone there who has some legal background and some commercial insights, knowing also what the competitors might or might not be doing and which type of question we have to answer, how we have to write up reports, what is really required for, if people want to, for example, make a claim, what type of data we need, in which type of databases we have to upload it, whether or not we can make it public, whether or not we can publish or say anything about it. And then there's the operating model just for proteomic services, where it's typically just a one-on-one conversation with someone who has a sample where I want to measure, I want to know which protein groups are in here. And there's just a proteomic specialist saying, okay, we can do this and this, but very small, small projects there. And that operating model works well because the platform is really set up in the research institute, and we have to follow the rules of the research institute. The thoughts that I have is what we have is there's only very few staff, which we really could call the proteomics team. Although a lot more people are involved. So we have quite some bioinformaticians and statisticians we can consult, but are not really part of the team because they're doing lots of other projects on lots of other data as well. We have protein scientists who sometimes are dragged into projects, but they're also not really mass spec specialists. And we have research technicians who are able to work with the mass specs, but need to be flexible enough to be put on projects if someone else in the research institute needs their expertise. So that means that because there is so much flexibility and people are doing so many different things, it also means that it's quite hard to have people that have the absolute skills and in-depth knowledge that you actually would need, I think, in a core facility. And the other thought is then, because there are so many people involved and all these people are working on so many different projects, quick turnaround times for bigger projects is typically not possible, which can be frustrating for people, definitely. If we look at data, so we have quite specialized data management rules in place. We started it as in the team with proteomics metabolomics, but then the rest of the research institute has followed more or less the same rules. We always ask, or we always want to have an in-depth experimental design where everyone agrees on and it's signed off before we acquire the data. There are always rules on the time frame for data storage. It can be either a question that the client asked, but if the client doesn't have a real opinion on that, then we have government rules we have to follow and store the data for a certain amount of time at a certain server. And then the other part of the data is there's always an increased need for data processing, compute, and storage capabilities. And there, the proteomics platform has the advantage that there's other omics and research areas with similar issues. So what we can see is that the research institute, there's research institute-wide investments on additional capabilities, and that's also something where the platform per se, we need to make a little bit of noise saying we're generating a lot of data and we need to store them, and we're getting out of compute because we want to use this software with this algorithm and it's not working. But they can see this request coming from lots of other people as well. And every year there's just a research-wide investment. Financially, so we are not independent in the research institute, what actually means we have no finance overview of how the platform is performing, which is for me good and bad. So good in the sense I don't have to look too much at finance numbers because we cannot extract them. Bad in the sense that I actually don't have an overview of how we are doing. And sometimes that's asked, and then it's a little bit harder to get that information or to try to extract the information. And what that actually really means is, as I already said, so the employees are paid by the research institute and not for the platform. So if, for example, a research technician in the next month isn't allocated 100% to the platform, they will just allocate him or her somewhere else. And even if a project then arrives, then you have to find someone else to do that type of job. So there is a lot of flexibility, but it has definitely some limitations. The institute has overheads because there are people that like research that are not scientists that are very helpful. But that, of course, makes analysis also a little bit more expensive. There's a rule in research for all types of science we do. We cannot charge per sample, which sometimes makes it a little bit harder as well. And we try that all projects carry the cost of the consumables as well as the research hours for the scientists who work on that. And the big aim of a platform, even if I don't have the finance numbers, is still to go break even. And that is a lot more in if we would be running at a significant loss. There's always a risk for no new investments, which of course makes sense. And then it's really hard that we don't have that full visibility on the finance. But I think, yeah, for our platform, the major thing is we're typically more expensive to run samples than facilities at the university. So that makes it sometimes harder or harder conversations to have with clients. Because there is a lot more expense, what we in projects sometimes do is really go in one way, one type of extraction and just say, oh, we have done this in the past, it should work, and just do only one way and not try to innovate as much. Luckily, there's still lots of innovation, but we have to try and put that in some other way. So typically the larger multi-year programs have some PhD students, which are in collaboration with universities, and most of their questions are quite innovative. And then we have some blue sky projects where it's like, oh, this is a very interesting question. We have no idea how to do it. There's money to do and to try to find a solution for it for the next 3 years. Then government is adding some funding as well in some very specialized areas where they really want us to be key. And one of these areas is fiber research. So yeah, I'm the lucky one who sometimes measure keratin on mass specs, which is not that fascinating as I thought it would be. But it's also a lot more fun than I thought it would be. So that's all good. And then they also sometimes put funding into some new research fields of interest. And then procurement-wise, because we're partly funded by government, we need to follow the same procurement rules as universities, so it's always via tender. The Research Institute has a yearly CapEx budget. There's 800 staff. If I would count and say, oh, these people are really the proteomics team, then we are 4. So buying a new mass spec takes quite a while to get approved. So what for larger CapEx, or for example, a new mass spec, what we have to do is first really write a business case to the research director showing these are the opportunities we miss because we don't have this type of capability. And once they approve, then you write a big business case with finance details for the executive leadership team, who then approve, and then it goes to the board. So the process is very slow. It can take a year or 2 before there's an approval, but once you get approval, it's very rewarding. And contract-wise, it's every project goes to the same pipeline and the same rules, whether or not it's proteomics or any other type of science within a research institute. And it takes quite some time because legal needs to look over it, and lots of people need to give their approval. So we have something in place which we call master agreement with some companies or research organizations, where all the legal terms are already set in this master agreement. And if there is something special that they want to measure, then it's a smaller subcontract. And that is definitely helping for proteomic services, because sometimes it would be that the contract takes 6 weeks to get signed, and the actual measurements and the data analysis and everything else takes 3 hours. So that's almost insane. Luckily, what we typically see for proteomics is that all the project management is typically not the end responsibility of the platform, because it's in larger projects and research programs. So that gives us a lot more time for science. But I think, yeah, the big thing what Ike Research is trying to do is going from the separate omics platform really in an operating model of an integrated analytical platform by means of systems biology. And I think in the end, what we kind of want to do is just great science. And with that, I think I've given a little bit of an overview of how we work. And this is a snapshot of the proteins and metabolites team. We're always very fun to work with. And with that, I thank you for listening. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that great talk. And yeah, spot on with the scope. So in at the deep end, but well done. So we've got, as I say, if anyone's got any questions, either chuck them into the chat or put your hand up now. Or the other part is we can also do both talks and then have a more of a wide-ranging general discussion at the end. But we do have one question from Jeff in the chat, who is asking if you collaborate with nesi.org.nz regarding your computer storage challenges.
Yes, we do. And I think normally next year we're really in a big collaboration to make the most compute in New Zealand. And it's really good that we partner with these research organizations just to get all these compute together, because you can just say like, oh, proteomics just needs this, and then these people just need this. And by the time all these requirements are getting there, then you need like the most fancy HPC ever, and 100 terabytes of storage a month, and all these things. And NESI is very helpful with that, and collaborating with them is great.
Excellent. Oh, got one, Ralph.
Great talk, Evelyn, by the way. I'm just wondering, so maybe I missed, maybe you said this, I don't know. Given you are a government-funded research institute, do you have to worry about grants and those kind of things? Do you apply for grants, or is the money
Yes.
yes?
No, so it's only partly funded. So it has some money for research projects or research areas where the governments decide this is where there is value for New Zealand, or this is where we need to be better at. But it's for proteomics, it's around 30%. So there's 70% where we still have to apply for grants. But that's all, yeah, that's project grants. CapEx goes a completely different way. So there's no, we don't need to worry about that. We just need to convince people that we need a new mass spec. And unfortunately, they're always way too expensive to get a definite yes. So that takes quite a while.
Okay, but with these grants, you're also driving the grants, or is it like you're being named on the grants, or is it like
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it depends a little bit on if it's really big research grants, then people will consult us to see, oh, we are thinking of an example, some metaproteomics of some bacteria in soil, which can be a new fertilizer for this and this and this pasture. What then is I will be named. I'm not writing the grants because my expertise in fertilization is almost nihil, but people will consult us to see, can we do this? What do we need? Is there something that the platform can, that we don't have yet, but will have in a few years? Or is this grant something where this grant can help with purchasing a new mass spec? Because if the money comes in and we cannot do it, so yeah, there's definitely something from that part as well. The more grants we have with doing really funky things we cannot do on our current mass specs, the higher the chance they buy a mass spec, so we can do the grants and not lose the money.
Great, thanks.
So I've got one question. So the bosses that I'm always trying to go to get more funding and more support, are always very keen at coming up with these random nebulous phrases of, oh, we just need to look at the research outputs and your productivity, and then we'll obviously give you more of everything you want if you meet our goals. But they're never very good at spelling out where the goals lie. With your industrial contracts, which obviously make up a big chunk of your workload, and as you say, a lot of them are commercially in confidence. How easy do you feel it is for you to say, oh, look, I'm meeting my objectives, I've done all of these projects? And do you feel that the powers that be recognize those projects?
They do, because it's, again, if the research institute wouldn't work together with these companies, then it's not for benefit for New Zealand. So it's definitely, if we wouldn't have any commercial projects whatsoever in the proteomics platform, then leadership would also look at it and say, like, this is not relevant. You're just doing it for science. Science can be done at university. Done. Get your mass specs over somewhere else and move. So it's really finding that balance, but there always needs to be some benefits. And for us, it's a lot more showcasing with, this is what the client wants. This is what we currently cannot do because of this and this reason. If it's only one client that wants it and it's a 100K project, no one is going to move anything. But if it's only 5 clients who wants to do it and it start to add up, then people are going to look into it. Can we do it somewhere in New Zealand? Is it somewhere overseas? How much would it cost? Is it beneficial for us to have that capability, or do we partner with a research institute or a university who has that capability? So it's just really making the noise than anything else. But yeah, commercial is very important in a research institute.
Excellent. Well, on that case, we'll thank you just for the moment, and then obviously come back to you at the end for more questions. And now we'll change gear and move country. And our next speaker is Laura Dangley, who's the Proteomics Facility Manager at the Walter and Eliza Institute over in Melbourne, where she did her undergraduate degree as well as staying there for a PhD, although she did get to spend a lot of the time for that PhD over in Toronto. And it was in 2014 that she joined WEHI, and still focuses a lot on disease biomarkers, inflammatory disorders and cancer, but I'm sure she's kept very busy trying to run that facility, and today we'll share with us what it's like to work in one of the innovation powerhouses of proteomics. Laura, over to you.
Great, thank you. Everyone can see my screen, okay? Yep, great. Okay, firstly, thank you to Ralph and Ben for the opportunity to speak to you today. I will probably echo many of what Evelyn's said today, but I'm going to come to probably a different, maybe more data-heavy perspective, and show you some of the things that we're doing in the lab. So to start with, this is just probably a photo from a couple of years ago. This is the WEHI buildings down in Parkville. So we're in the heart of the Parkville precinct in Melbourne. You can see on your left the photo of, this is where there's an early learning centre that was built maybe 3 years ago. That's one of the nice things working at WEHI is that they really try and cater for people that are, early stage of early career scientists that really have a family, and try and help people balance work and life. So that's been definitely a very valuable part of working at WEHI. Although our lab is actually not in this building, we're actually in the Royal Melbourne Hospital building, which is features next door to the Walter Eliza Hall. So WEHI has 5 main themes across 15 divisions, and there are over 80 labs at WEHI. So they range from a number of different areas. So we've got cancer research, healthy development and aging, so like neurological disorders, infection, inflammation, immunity. We have a very heavy bioinformatics and computational biology team. And then we have new medicines and advanced technologies. And that's the theme that our proteomics lab features under. So we're in the advanced technology and biology division alongside many other technology labs that we hire. So genomics, fax imaging, histology, and the screening lab. So that's the National Drug Discovery Centre and the monoclonal antibody facility. So our facility is made up of it's had a complete rejuvenation, I would say, in the last year or so. So we've had quite a strong recruitment phase this year to recruit basically 4 new postdocs into the lab. So Andrew Webb, who many of you may know, he's still the academic lab head in the facility. He's also the head of the Colonial Centre for Healthy Aging, which is a new initiative that started a few years ago. And they are also embedded next to the facility. So I won't speak much about it today, but they're a large sort of centre that's focused on clinical translation of biomarkers that sit alongside our facility. I've been a postdoc in Andrew's lab for the last 5 years, and this year was promoted to the proteomics facility manager to sort of manage the instrumentation and facilitate the experimental work that happens in the facility. We're very fortunate to be able to find 4 people to join our lab this year. Samantha Emery Corbin, so she's, many of you may know her, she's been working at WeHi a number of years in another lab, but she's joined our lab full-time as of very recently, so as a postdoc. We've got Sebash, who's joined the lab early this year to head up the CETSA MS sort of group, trying to drive forward a number of the research into CETSA. Jemana, who's a bioinformatician and statistician that we're very happy of having her with us, joining, a dedicated bioinformatician to analyze data specifically and help us really innovate the kinds of data analysis that we have in the lab. And Toby Diet, who's specifically joined the lab to help with driving forward experiments related to turbo ID and PTM signaling. And he joined us earlier middle of this year from after a postdoc in Dundee. And we're hoping to recruit someone for early next year to lead the HGX and structural proteomics aspect of the lab. So we have quite a number of areas that we work on. This is just sort of gives you a flavor of the kind of research that we do. So we go all the way from clinical biomarkers, and that's something that's heavily collaborative with the Colonial Centre, alongside cell surface proteomics, phosphoproteomics, interactomics, structural proteomics, and PTM, HDX, and cross-linking mass spec, as well as drug targets, like with the CETSA technique. And obviously, with Jemana's assistance, we're trying to do more, computational proteomics, more machine learning. So in terms of our operational model, so we have operated a cost recovery. So we try to recover costs for each of the different steps of the workflow. So they include sample preparation, mass spec time, and data analysis time. And so we are able to, WeHi subsidizes internal users around 50% of the cost, whilst we have to recover full costs for external academic users. So essentially, we have a strong focus of training students and postdocs that are willing to learn, especially in the sample preparation area. So we don't charge a complete cost to train users, we charge it at a 50% rate. And if the user is very experienced, and they don't require any assistance, then we don't charge anything for that. We then obviously charge for hours of mass spec time, and this is the same rate with every instrument we have in the lab. And obviously we are always looking at how to implement new features and new ways of acquiring our data. And obviously are very happy to train users, although we prefer, as Evelyn was saying, to run all the samples ourselves. We're very particular, I would say, about who we let into the instrument room. It's got its own special lock and key. You can't get in unless you're authorized. So we're very heavily protective of our instruments. And then it's the data analysis phase. So with Jemana's help, we've been able to implement a number of sort of features and new ways to analyze our data. And we have a very strong emphasis on auto QC and making sure that the instruments are always performing at their optimum. So we have a QC digest, a commercial digest of HeLa that we run after every project, making sure that all the peak widths are within a certain range, the mass error, number of proteins and peptides are within a certain range. And that's very important to us. We have very high standards in terms of not running samples unless the instruments are performing at their peak. And we obviously, yes, are happy to always train users at every stage of this area. So our strategy, I guess, that we hire in terms of supporting internal and external projects is really to be very consultative. So we meet with collaborators very early on to discuss their ideas, even before they've even collected any samples, because we really want to have a lot of input in terms of experimental design, the way the data should be acquired, and what methods we should be using, rather than just them saying, look, I saw this paper, I think we should do it this way. We might suggest something a bit different. And we always provide a cost estimate and get the sign of approval before we initiate a project. We're also very happy to train staff in these methods and techniques. I would say pre-COVID, this was something that we would do a lot of the time, but in the last year or so, I would say it's not been so possible, but we're definitely in favor of doing this. And this is part of our remit as a facility to mentor and train staff. And that includes partly the career development of all the postdocs in the lab as well. We provide regular updates to all of our collaborators in terms of how their samples are, where they are in the queue, the time frame that they're likely to receive the data. And then when their data is finally available, we use an interactive website through Spotfire, which is made by TIBCO, and allows users to interact with their data manually and look up proteins and visualize the volcano plots and things like that. So, and that's something that we've found very valuable in terms of communicating our data to collaborators. And I guess, I'm not sure how this compares with other facilities, but we do sort of, if we make a substantial contribution to the research that's been done or a project, we do tend to co-publish with the collaborators. And that's something that's been very well sort of done. It's been very well done over the last few years. So in terms of the types of instrumentation we have in the lab, we have a mix of Brooker instruments and Thermo Fisher instruments. So within the last 2 years, we brought this LEAP HDX automation robot with the idea that it would help us with our HDX projects, and that will be coupled to our Maxis 2 high resolution instruments in the lab. So that's something that instrument has been working mostly for intact MS projects, but the hope is that in early next year, we'll be able to start HDX projects running as well. And I guess our two main workhorses of the lab, and that's been a mainstay for a number of years now, is the two timsTOF Pro instruments we have in the lab. And you can see them here. We've got two different types of LCs attached. One of them is the M-class UPLC, and one of them is a PAL robot that's been sort of customized with the sort of PAL robot that remained after the nanoloop was taken apart. So you can see the Brooker symbol here with the help of Sam Isser in our lab, who's part of the Colonial Centre. He customized this LC, I would say, and it's got a Dynex pump sitting underneath it. So we run a lot of our global proteomics studies on these instruments, and we're starting to do a lot more DIA passive, which I'll talk to you about very soon. We also have two instruments, one older, one newer. We have the Orbitrap Eclipse that was bought last year, which was specifically bought with the idea that we would drive the SETSA MS projects through because it's particularly good at TMT, analyzing TMT data, and also potentially PROTAC MS experiments as well. So this is sort of the degraded kind of MS. So this is when you're looking at a drug target that might be looking at degrading a certain protein and they're designed as drugs. So looking at drug target interactions. And we've recently been fortunate to have the Vanquish Neo seated in our lab. A couple of weeks ago it was installed. So we are testing that out, and that's a collaboration with Ion Optics, who's some of you may know is a local company that's spun out of Weihai to just test some of their columns alongside the Eclipse. We have also the very old instrument, Cubic Active Classic, that we've got coupled with the Ultimate 3000 that is doing a lot of targeted MS projects, such as like aquapeptide quant, for example. So our CMS platform, I would say, is mostly using these sort of ion optics columns. And the nice thing about these columns is that they allow us not to have to change them over so often. We can get at least 3 months of time without having to change them at all. And we use these sonation column heaters to have these columns sitting underneath. And then they're just a nanoviper line connect to the LC. And I guess what I'll show you some data from is that, using a 15 centimeter column, which allows you to use quite high flow rates and loading and equilibration times, we've been able to run our samples within 45 minutes, basically, with a 30-minute gradient. And that's really transformed a lot of our work and made our total acquisition times for projects be reduced by at least half or more. So that's really transformed, I would say, what we do in the lab. And on average, we don't have to change the columns too often, depending on obviously what kind of samples we have. But as I said, we're very particular about how our samples are prepared. And we have no trapping columns, so everything goes directly injected into the system. So I think the combination of the Brooker instruments as well as the columns we found that to be quite optimal for us. In terms of the way that we charge, so we charge an hourly rate for the sample prep, the mass spec time, and also the data analysis. But we can give internal and external users the ability to buy number of hours in advance. So they can buy 50, 100, 250, 500 hours at a proportional discounted rate. And this is to encourage people to think ahead and think long-term in a calendar year of what kind of projects they may want to do, and maybe not think about too much the costs, I would say, but think like big picture, like what can I do that's not sort of restricted to a budget, I would say. And we encourage people that haven't used proteomics before at WeHire to trial us, and we give them the first 20 hours free. This is sort of gives them an incentive to maybe come back to us and actually pay for the work next time. And large divisions that WeHire are eligible to purchase larger number of hours to sort of spread around different labs. And this has actually worked quite well this year. And this is the first year we've actually implemented this method. So it's worked out quite well. So I'll go back to the slide. So this is sort of the types of experiments we do in the lab. As I mentioned, we have a number of sort of projects that we're looking at clinical biomarkers. We've been doing this with plasma and urine and looking at exosomal proteins as well in a number of different contexts. So we collaborate with a number of labs at the Royal Melbourne Hospital as well as at other institutes in Australia, and have a number of projects that are ongoing. We also have optimized different workflows for self-surface proteomics. We're doing a lot more phosphoproteomics with time course analysis. You can imagine WeHire has a lot of labs that are interested in cell signaling pathways. We also do a number of interactomics kind of studies with flag IPs, antibody IPs, turbo ID. HDX we're hoping to get going from next year. And then we have other sort of typical cross-linking mass spec experiments that we typically run for people. And then we have sort of a larger area growing in terms of the drug target discovery. And I think this is largely driven by a good collaboration with the chemical biology division at WeHire. And there's a strong sort of network of people that are doing screening experiments and then wanting to look at, they have a drug that they've developed and they want to know what the target is. So we do a lot of those drug target studies. I guess something that's also been happening over the last few years is the way we've been thinking about how we process our samples. And I think, the old school methods of lysing a sample, sonicating it, reducing, alkylating, like there's a lot of steps that you have to go through. And, you know, I think I presented this a couple of years ago at Lawn, but we basically come up with another methodology that essentially reduces all these sort of steps into one workflow. And this is something that's really helped with getting more samples through our doors and running them in high throughput manner. So we essentially do all these steps in one step. We use trifluoroacidic acid to hydrolyze DNA, so we don't have to sonicate it. And we add reduction alkylation buffers that basically mean our protein is reduced and alkylated in one go. And then we do our on-bead digest method. And we found, and we published this a couple of years ago, but we found it to be, you know, quite highly reproducible, and it's our go-to method for most of our global proteomics platforms. So our workflow looks something like this. We normally have a sample of someone's cell palette that comes up. We lyse it in SDS lysis buffer. We hydrolyze the DNA, neutralize it, and then add our magnetic beads to do our on-bead digest. And then we have an optional step here if we're looking at phosphoproteomics using the iron IMAC beads. And then a C18 cleanup step, and then onto the mass spec. Here we've got our timsTOF Pro, our favorite workhorse. And I think one of the things that we like about the timsTOF is that we're finding that we can get really high selectivity and sensitivity of our data. And obviously this is something you may have heard called DIA passive. It's a little bit different to what you've maybe heard of in the past. So you've got your traditional DDA types of methods where you're fragmenting the top most abundant precursors that you're seeing. You typically get in the order of 35, 40,000 peptides, about 5,000 proteins. But one of the major challenges is the missing values that exist in that data set. And obviously you need to acquire the data for a longer amount of time to really maximize what you can see. And then DIA methods have been out for quite a long while, which provide with increased capacity. You've got the ability to scan multiple windows, MS1 windows, and then fragment all your masses within each of the windows at MS2 level. And that obviously increases your number of IDs and reduces your missing values, but you still have to dedicate a good amount of time to kind of get the most out of your sample. But the nice thing about the timsTOF Pros is that there's a TIMS device at the front, which provides this fourth level of selectivity through the collisional cross-sectional area. And essentially it allows you to do DIA passive and allows you to see up to 90,000 peptides, nearly complete proteome coverage in terms of 8,000 proteins. And you're minimizing your CVs and your missing values, and you can do it in less than an hour. So this has really revolutionized what we do in the lab. And I'll give you a few examples of how this has worked. I think another major point is to say that this would not have been possible without the availability of this software called Diane. And that's something that was published last year by Vadim in Marcus Rails's lab. And I think the nice thing about this software is that you can even do library and library free searches. So you can either generate fractionation library offline and then use that, do DDA runs, and then use that as your library search, or you can search it library free and just ask, use machine learning to essentially assign your protein and peptide IDs. So this combination has really worked, has transformed what we do. An example is a cell line where we've looked at looking at the knockout cell line versus wild type. And you can see we've basically been able to identify up to 8,000 proteins reproducibly across all our replicates with very minimal missing values. And that was done with a fractionation library in this case. But we've got examples here where we've just used a library-free approach, and we've been able to identify nearly 6,500 proteins in mouse macrophages doing a cytokine stimulation, so a time course experiment. And we've got sort of 3 clusters of proteins that are changing over time. And this is something that's really not been, I think, as possible before, to see this many proteins changing reproducibly and to quantify that over time. The last example is just a 293T cell line looking at PROTAC drug experiments. So they've treated some cells with different types of drugs. They know in one case or another the drug target that it should be identified, and we can see nearly 8,000 proteins reproducible, and we've identified their targets that they're expecting to see. So we think this kind of approach will really transform this whole area in terms of sets of mass spec and PROTAC, where people have traditionally done like TMT-based experiments. We think that we could do nearly outperform maybe this approach with just label-free proteomics. So in terms of the future, so we're always thinking a step ahead of what we would like to be done in our lab. So we're thinking about automating our sample preparation, so using liquid handling robots and magnetic beads. And this is something that's been done with the Colonial Centre. So they're automating the analysis of 12,000 urine samples, or it'll be at 20,000 by the end. And this has not been possible without the help of the National Drug Discovery Centre using all their liquid handling robots. So this is something we would like to piggyback on eventually and hopefully implement in our lab as well. We'd like to keep implementing our DIA passive workflows with fast gradients on 15-centimeter columns, and we're currently optimizing for this working for phospho-DIA passive. So looking if we can implement this for phosphoproteomics, because we think there's a lot of opportunity here. We're also building capacities in the CETSA MS and PROTAC MS fields, as I was saying, because there's a strong emphasis at WeHire on drug discovery and drug target identification. And obviously we have another focus on exosomes and using them as surrogates for biomarker discovery in plasma for clinical diagnosis. So in summary, I would say that we maybe are a non-traditional facility, that we're very highly consultative, and we may be a bit selective in what we process in terms of projects. We have a very large focus on QCs and instrument performance, and are constantly thinking about how to optimize what we're doing in the lab. We can do a range of different experimental techniques, and we sort of pride ourselves in being able to do that. And we actually have an aim to cost recover as well. We're not profit driven at all. We try and cost recover, but as many of you know, it's a very expensive endeavor. Proteomics is never going to be something that you can cost recover completely. But our facility aim is to really cost recover as much as possible. And we are very much focused on making sure that our internal WeHire collaborators are prioritized ahead of external projects. And obviously that has sometimes meant that we can't take on as many external projects as we would like. But hopefully with more people that coming into our lab, we can help increase sort of our numbers of projects that can come through. So with that, I'd like to finally acknowledge a lot of people that have contributed to this work. So our team at WeHire, so Andrew, Samantha, Toby, Jemana, and Sabash, and many sort of past and present members. So Rune, who was a PhD student that many of you may not have remembered at Lorne, he's now moved back to Denmark. He pioneered some of the phosphoproteomic studies. Simon Cobbold, who's a postdoc in David Commander's lab, who's doing a lot of the proteomics work himself in our facility. Members of the Colonial Centre, so Sam and Steve, who ex-thermo people, and Sukhdeep, who's a lab manager as well of the Colonial Centre, and as well as Jared and Giuseppe, who have both moved on to bigger and better things. And they're still sort of very much colleagues and friends of ours at WeHire. And also acknowledging a lot of the past and present collaborators with that we thank very much for their collaborations, and hopefully can continue well into the future. And last sort of spruik, we talked about this at the start. So the Lorne Proteomics Symposium is back on next year with an in-person event at Lorne. If you didn't know already, the abstracts are due today. I have a hint that maybe they might be extended another week. So you might be lucky to get your abstract in, but I think you better book fast. It's going to be a really great event, and I really encourage you all to come along. And with that, I'd like to stop there and just take any questions. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Right, so we still have, well, a couple of minutes before the break. If anyone wants to jump in with a question. I'm glad to see you already managed to answer one of the questions that popped up in the chat during the talk.
Maybe yeah, I can start. Laura, fantastic talk, awesome. Actually, two questions from my side. So first of all, I mean, I know you guys are big into timsTOF and DIA passive, but given you have an Eclipse on board, have you ever compared these two, or do they run different applications? I'm just wondering what your point is of timsTOF versus Eclipse.
Okay, so in terms of DIA mode, or
in general, just
in general,
numbers
yeah,
and fees and
yeah. So we have benchmarked projects for sure. I would say that DIA passive outperforms the Eclipse. I guess it depends on what mode. So we've also tried some DIA FAMEs as well, and I think it's comparable to a point. And I guess we haven't got the exact setup on the Eclipse as we do on the timsTOF, so I guess it's a bit hard to compare. But I guess I would just say in general, the DIA strategy is really transforming everything. We've basically switched completely to DIA because we can just get so much more complete data and in a shorter time. So we can run 30-minute gradients and get the data that's better than a 2-hour run on DDA, essentially. So it just makes complete sense to switch over. And I think, yeah, that's really where we're at the moment.
Yeah, fully agree. Awesome.
Yep.
Second question from my side is, you mentioned this just sort of like in a side note, but you said you want to meet with collaborators, before the project starts, and I couldn't agree more. The issue we sometimes face is that you have. So how successful is this in general? Of course, if collaborators know this, then they will take you up on this.
Yep.
But for example, we get so many people who in the worst case scenario just drop samples off and say, hey, here you go.
Yeah.
Please do your best. So how does it? So I'm just wondering what you're.
Yeah, I guess people have learned over time that we don't like that happening. So if they just drop off samples, there's a chance that we can't get them the data that they want, unfortunately. So we've made it very clear that we like to speak to collaborators early on. So, 3 replicates sounds like a good idea, but it's not always, it just takes one replicate that fails that you basically lose the ability to analyze your data properly. So I guess, as I was saying, we're very selective about and want to get across that we need to speak early on. And I appreciate what you're saying. And I guess if you're just so inundated with projects, you just can't really get that message across. But I think from our perspective, once people start seeing the quality of the data when they have more replicates and the experimental design is properly done, then they say, oh yeah, maybe I should just check with them before I prepare my samples, if you know what I mean. So people start learning what the best approach is, I think, eventually.
But you haven't put anything in place, just like you send out, I don't know, institute-wide documents, really outlining this. So it's a bit like learning by doing, and you talk to people.
No, it's a good idea. I think we would like to start sort of outlining out the best practice, I guess, having sort of documents available online for people to kind of see what ideally is involved. And I think we do have a note on our internal website about what we would want collaborators to potentially give us in terms of replicates and numbers of protein, number of samples. But sometimes it's challenging when people just have an idea in their mind that they've got these samples, this should be fine. Here are my samples, can you please analyze it? And it's sort of like, well, actually, this is not exactly, that's not the best control that I would have recommended. And you go back and sometimes it's iterative. So you have to kind of come up with a plan that you collectively agree on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think we've got time for one quick question more before the break. Harsha?
Yeah, that was a great talk, Laura. So how hands-on are you on data analysis after you acquire data?
Yes, so Jemana, who's actually online, she is our data analysis guru. So she looks very carefully through all the data and she analyzes each of our projects, looking through all the different outliers and normalizes the data and goes through a very robust process of data analysis. So we are very hands-on. So we like to search the data, analyze the data, and then hand it over to collaborators. So our postdocs in our lab individually, they might search the data and then give them to Jemana to analyze. And we very much want to make sure the data quality is there before we start initiating the conversation back with the collaborator. If something is not quite right, we go back to the mass spec and just rerun it or modify what we've done to make sure that the data quality is there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, I just see Nick's quickly stuck his hand in, obviously keen to keep the conversation going. Nick?
Just a question, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just a question, maybe also to Laura, but also to Evelyn. So you talk about supporting your staff and stuff. I'm wondering how in both of your organisations you do things like, obviously no one's been going to conferences lately, but getting funding to go to conferences. You talked about Lorne, when you go to whoever's your money holder and you say, oh, we want to send everyone to Lorne.
Yeah.
How much of a fight do you have to put up? And how does it work?
So we have a budget that we have to work towards, and obviously travel is a part of the budget. And I think we just make the strong case that we need to go to Lorne and maybe ASMS eventually when we can go out overseas again. And it's not normally too much of an issue as long as you're not in too much of a deficit. I guess like Evelyn was saying, or else you risk the possibility of not being able to buy new instruments. But I think there is always a case for, having the staff, their own career development, having the ability to network with people and communicate. And I think that's always something that should be prioritized as well. And I know it can be expensive. I think getting everyone to go to a conference at least once a year, but I think it's really important. And I think I would fight very hard to make sure we have the budget to do that each year. Yep.
From our side, it's your request to go to a conference. You have to fill in a document saying, this is the reason why I want to go. This is the output that I think I will get, or this is the people that I'm needing to meet in person. And there's team budget available for that. And it depends a little bit on what your role is, whether or not you can go once or 10 times or 20 times a year. But everyone in the team needs to go to a conference at least once a year to be a little bit up to date with what's happening, and not only in the agricultural field, but a lot wider as well. So there's definitely budget for that.
Excellent. Right. Well, I think in the interest of time, we're going to have to call this session to a close.
Ben, sorry, just a quick question probably to Laura in the chat from Krishna Tay. What data analysis tools do you employ besides mass dynamics? Can you just take an answer?
Yep. So we're definitely in communication with mass dynamics about sort of the data visualization aspect of the work. We actually use, so Jemana uses R scripts and does a lot of the manual analysis herself. We don't have a particular kind of, apart from Diane, the software, we don't. We just use the typical R scripts that most people use. So Limma, and then RUV, 3C to remove unwanted variation. There's this sort of typical pipelines that you can use for data analysis. But obviously Mass Dynamics is another company that have their own sort of ways of analyzing the data. And that's something that we obviously are keen to talk with them about. I think communicating that data to collaborators. So I think it's really nice what they've produced in terms of being able to make those pretty pictures, those publication-worthy figures that you need. So, yep.
Thanks. Awesome. Sorry, Ben.
Excellent. Well, I was going to say you're chairing the next session, so you can make up the time. But I think we now just have a 5-minute break to stretch our legs and get a glass of water or whatever we need to do, and reconvene, as I say, in 5 minutes, so just before 20 past. Excellent. Thanks.
Right.
And also
Thank you.
join me in thanking the speeches in a virtual clap.
Great job. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's 20 past. I can see Adam is not back yet. Maybe we should give him another minute before we kick off the second session. Okay, I think let's keep going for the interest of time. So it's my great pleasure to chair the second session and to introduce our actually 2 or 3 speakers depending on your count of the second session. So we have so the second session is about the Australian Biocommons, and we have Johan Gustafsson from Biocommons with us, who is the Bioinformatics Engagement Officer with Biocommons and responsible for engaging in particular with the proteomics and metabolomics community. And we also have Jeff Christensen there, who is the Associate Director of Engagement Operations with Australian Biocommons. And yes, I'm super looking forward to hearing what Johan and Jeff have to say about the Australian Biocommons and how they think, so what their mission is and how they think they can support the community, in particular in the bioinformatics space. And so, yeah, look, without further ado, over to you, Johan, and maybe you can also, address the questions of whether having a Scandinavian sounding surname is a prerequisite for working in Biocommons.
Not quite. I didn't see it when I joined, so so I'll just share my screen, and please let me know if you can't see that.
All good.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone to the Australian Biocommons session, and thanks very much, Ben and Ralph, for giving us the opportunity to join this meeting. We're obviously here to talk about the Biocommons, but I'd like to draw your attention to one concept in particular, or one question. What might we do collectively to empower experts and end users in mass spectrometry? So we'll revisit this question a bit later. The plan for today includes an introduction to the Biocommons, as well as a presentation by Matt Padula from the University of Technology, Sydney. We're then going to have 10 minutes for questions, followed up by a short poll. So this poll is hopefully going to inform a 20-minute breakout session, where we're going to use a shared Jamboard to discuss ways forward for bioinformatics in this community. But first, the introduction. So the Australian Biocommons exists to support life science communities with community scale digital infrastructure. The key here is that this support is targeted at communities and is intended to scale to that community. In addition to this, the Biocommons also enables access to computational services and provides training and support. When we talk about the community at large, we're referring to the roughly 30,000 life science investigators in Australia and approximately 200,000 students. The areas of interest aren't really surprising. They're health and biomedicine, agriculture, and biodiversity. And if we look a bit closer at these communities, when it comes to bioinformatics, they're roughly divided between wet lab researchers, data intensive researchers, bioinformatics intensive researchers who rely on bioinformatics approaches, and then finally bioinformaticians who typically sit at the bleeding edge. And so we're also covering not only many domains, but covering a spectrum of expertise in bioinformatics, with each group potentially having differing requirements. So how do we actually engage with these communities? So we have a formal process, and it's highlighted here on this slide. And firstly, it involves identification of a community. We'll then research and communicate with the community about their challenges and requirements. We'll formally document the requirements in consultation with the community so that we actually end up with a document at the end of that with a roadmap. And finally, we work to deploy workable solutions together with community members. Oops. The less formal but no less important part of our engagements extend the process I showed on the previous slide for the communities of practice that are shown at the top of the slide. So they cover things like genome annotation and assembly, but include proteomics and metabolomics. In the first instance, these engagements bring researchers from various communities together with computational infrastructures, and that's to address the very specific challenges. And some of the infrastructures that we work with are shown at the bottom of the slide. But this also includes data production and core service facilities, as well as national science drivers. So the prime example of the science drivers or consortia are currently the Bioplatforms Australia framework initiatives, but this does also extend to other groups, such as the Australian Pest Genomes Partnership. So the key here is that the Biocommons is an integrator and coordinator for bioinformatics across the communities, which leads me back to the question I asked at the start. What might we do collectively to empower experts and end users in mass spectrometry? The group assembled here today represent the expertise and the capacity, but you also represent a user base of researchers that rely on your facilities and expertise. So the question is, how do we leverage the role of facilities within the Australian mass spec community to empower the field and make sure that the infrastructure being put in place or the solutions being put in place are actually suited to the domains that you cover, like proteomics and metabolomics. So now I wanted to provide some concrete examples of what the Biocommons is currently doing to act as an integrator and enabler for bioinformatics. And I want to just start by talking about one of our key aims, which is to make bioinformatics infrastructure fit for purpose. And this impacts things like tools, workflows, benchmarks to describe how much resource these things need, and the compute systems which underpin all of the above. The types of things we want to achieve aren't really surprising. Wouldn't it be great if these artifacts and operating them was actually suitable for the communities we represent, findable and available, easy to deploy and reusable, right? The ways in which we're currently helping our communities to do this are quite broad, but they include things like workflow deployment and registration, tool installation, workflow testing and optimization, provision of specific services, training, and also accelerating the creation of reference data that's of use to the community. Now we'll look at some specific examples. The first specific example is ToolFinder. Now, ToolFinder is a service that presents the installed versions of community-relevant bioinformatics tools across Australian compute infrastructures. At the moment, this includes the National Computational Infrastructure, Pawsey Supercomputing Centre, QCIF Chris Cloud, and Galaxy Australia. So the list is intended to expand over time, and at its core, it's about finding out what's available where. So in the examples here, for those proteomics tools that are listed, you can discover where MaxQuant is actually available on national infrastructure. The service also connects directly to global bioinformatics, and it does this by tapping into the bio.tools registry, and it provides direct pathways to discovering more information about each tool. It's a fancy way of saying that we have embedded hyperlinks out to these resources and pull in metadata from those resources. A key question for the Biocommons is how this service is being used by the community and whether this can be used to identify obvious requirements for this group on specific compute. So in short, would this group and the users of your facilities make use of a service like this? And if so, how are you actually using it? And how can it be more fit for purpose? The second example is the provision of workflows on shared platforms. For graphical user interfaces, this is primarily Galaxy Australia at the moment. And shared platforms like this are important for use cases where a workflow consumer is not a bioinformatics expert. They need to perform a very specific task like label-free quantitation. They need to do this with relatively minimal support. And they absolutely still need to arrive at a meaningful result. For command line interfaces, we work across our communities and infrastructures to enable workflow developers to develop, maintain, find, and collaborate on workflows, as well as make them citable. But we also support the connection to the bioinformatics consumer, right? So someone who needs to find workflows, reuse them in a streamlined way, and be able to do things like access persistent identifiers so they can actually cite their approach. The findability and reusability aspects are being addressed by our collaboration with the Elixir Workflow Hub registry. The Biocommons space on this registry is formally presented alongside Toolfinder as the Workflow Finder service. And this lists workflows that are known to be deployable to specific Australian compute systems. So has a very specific purpose. The final example I wanted to cover is the Biocommons training program. This is an active, ongoing effort to provide national distributed training events to the Australian community, and includes webinars and workshops hosted by subject matter experts. So there are some examples here, including webinars on LFQ Analyst and Phosphamatics, and all of which are made available on platforms like the Biocommons YouTube channel. So that was a whirlwind tour of the Biocommons effort. In terms of the next steps, they really are to continue engaging. We'd love for you to join one of our communities of practice. But there are more specific examples of how you can get involved. I've just included two here, one of which is by contributing to workflow development within domains like proteomics or metabolomics, and sharing your expertise via our training program. Our communities really are our foundation, which means that if you have an idea, if you have a challenge, if you have a requirement that you think isn't being addressed, please let us know. Your ideas matter. So before I hand over to Matt, I just wanted to stress that the Biocommons effort is expansive and encompasses not only many national infrastructure collaborators and partners, but also our international peer infrastructures. So thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to Matt Padula from UTS, who's going to talk to us about using Galaxy to teach proteomics. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Johan. Just go over to the next slide, thanks. So I don't know how many people here actually engage in teaching programs and things like that. I've been teaching into a master's program for almost 10 years. We've been trying to teach proteomics at a postgrad level. But if you've tried to teach proteomics to students, you're probably going to be familiar with a few of these problems where they've probably got no background and no idea of what you're actually talking about. But when you actually teach these things, the actual pipeline of what you teach doesn't really change. It's sample prep, do some kind of separation, put it in the mass spectrometer, and then do data analysis on it. What we've done over a lot of years is the same thing over and over again, where we would use proprietary software, we would do a whole lot of data analysis ourselves, we would give them those data files, and we would be able to do limited interpretation on those kind of things. And there was a number of reasons for doing that. But the point I want to make is that a lot of things changed due to COVID, but a lot of things didn't change due to COVID. Our university has done online learning for the best part of 7 or 8 years. And so we do a lot of pre-work online before we get these kids into a workshop to do other things. So what we try and do is we would develop all of these materials, we'd put them online, and off the kids would go. Galaxy has actually changed a lot of what we do because they've actually developed a lot of these training things for us. I mean, I don't see why I should spend my time developing materials that already exist. And what this actually does as well is that not just for our postgraduate students, but for the students who are coming into the facility to do stuff, we can point them to these things first to say, go and do that, go and learn that, go through that data and understand and familiarize yourself with what's going on, and then come back and talk to us. And then we can have a meaningful conversation, because I'm not spending a whole lot of time teaching you the basics that you can go and find out at your own leisure, in your own pace from here. And that goes really well when the students, the postgraduate students, start to do this, because they can go into these tutorials, screw it up, do it again, learn it again, as many times as they want in their own time. And so the students in our courses do generate their own data from their own samples. And then so they go through this process and then they can attack their own data. The other thing that Galaxy allows us to do is that now I don't have to go and bang down the door of IT to get 30, 40 computers installed with the latest viewer of peaks, or if I wanted to get the latest version of MaxQuant installed. And the students don't have to install software for themselves. So because all this is working in a web browser, it makes life just so much simpler to not only teach these guys the basics in the background, but actually get them to be able to analyze their own data. Next slide, please, Johan. So what we do in our subject is we've got 35 to 50 students, depending on the year. They generate 2 1 gigabyte data files each, which is basically what comes out of a DDA experiment on our QExactive platform. Yes, I'm going to go to DIA, but that can wait till next year. If we were doing this on desktops, like I said, we'd have to get them to install 50 desktops with MaxQuant. You know, those things go slow. We don't really have access to the HPC to be able to do student level learning. And one of the reasons that I really, really detest MaxQuant is because of, on the desktop version, actually setting up the searches to begin with. It's really easy for me to screw them up. And if I can screw it up, the students can certainly screw it up. And I've got better things to do with my time than to troubleshoot their parameter files. Galaxy just makes that so much easier. I don't have to install anything. I don't have to license anything. They can access it from anywhere, which was fantastic during COVID when they weren't allowed to come on to campus. It was searching faster. And one of the things that we've overcome from the past is that these computer labs that they have on campus, they're multi-use. You can't leave things running on them. As soon as you log out, everything that's running on that computer stops. So things like MaxQuant and long searches and things like that, forget it. So we need to be able to have them on a server. The other thing that makes life easy are these wonderful interfaces like the one shown on the right-hand side here that whoever developed the tool did, where all of these crazy parameters that you could possibly use are now streamlined down into one nice thing. If you want a really elaborate parameter file, you can build those things in your desktop MaxQuant and then load them into another version of MaxQuant on Galaxy that will run from parameter files. So there's nothing stopping you from doing all sorts of weird, eclectic parameter files. But for teaching students, this is much nicer. It's just a basic set of things, and each step has a nice little explanation so that they know what they're doing and what it means. I think that's all I've got to talk about. I think the next slide is just, oh yes, of course. So how hard is this to actually do? All I did was contact a particular person at Galaxy, Igor, and said, I've got this many students, this is what they're going to do. He gave me a little part of the server, and the students then had to go and click on a link to make sure that they were logged into that part of the apparatus, and all of their analysis happened in there on their own dedicated queue, so that we weren't competing with every other job that the genomics people are doing in their queues. So that made things a little bit faster and a little bit better. So the challenges for implementing this was next to nothing. The only problems that happened were the things that students normally do. They don't listen to what they're told. And so they would do things without going to the right link, or they wouldn't follow instructions, the usual stuff. The other thing that they did was they're leaving shit to the last minute, like the night before. And interestingly, even though this was sent out on a broadcast email to all users, the Saturday and Sunday before this particular assignment was due, Galaxy was down for maintenance. And so all of these students freaked out. I haven't done it. And I'm like, I don't care. But what the students who were working on these things, they said, the tutorials are easy to follow. They didn't have a problem with them accessing the data or anything like that. They didn't have problems setting up their searches. The only thing that they were surprised at was how long that it actually took searches to run, because they were of this impression that, you know, there's this massive supercomputer somewhere behind all of this. But they've got no experience in searching this data before. So I think their expectations were a little bit out of line with reality. For most of us, we'd run these searches, we'd set them up one and walk away and come back the next morning or something like that. And we'd be like, yep, okay, that's done. I mean, it is pretty comparable to a fairly high performance desktop, which, I don't have access to with students. So that's all I've really got to say. It was a very positive experience. I'm definitely going to be doing it again. There's a lot of things that I learned from going through this that I will be able to update the students for to make this work a little bit better again. But like I said, all of the problems that happened were not problems with the Galaxy end of it. They were just problems with the student end of it. So yes, that's all I've got to say. And I'm happy to take questions later on or now, or yeah. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Matt. So we've got some time scheduled in now for questions. So I'll stop sharing.
So maybe I can Anna, Anup has a question. Go for it.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for the excellent talk. Yeah, I completely agree with all the points you raised. Yeah, teaching student is a skill, and plus, yeah, if you are using some proprietary softwares that they have to install on their Windows machines, adds another layer of complexity. I was just wondering, I had a couple of questions. So yeah, did student, because like most of us were working from home, and yeah, uploading and downloading files can take a while. Yep. Sometimes, depending on your internet situation. So did you have any bugs of doing that, or?
No one, well, so what I did was I gave them the option. I said to these people, look, if you've got a problem with internet or something like that, or bandwidth, I will give you the protein groups file, because what we ended up doing this year, because we couldn't get in the lab, we generated data for them. And so we gave them the option. We said, here's the data files that we used, that we generated for you to analyze. And there were 6 of them. So it was 7 gigs of data. Or here's a protein groups file that I've run through the system, and you can work on that. There were loads of people who just grabbed the raw data and went on with it. So they didn't seem to care that they were downloading and uploading 7 gigs of data. Yeah, that was not wasn't reported as a problem with this. I should actually mention, because I'll name check you. The next step after them getting their stuff out of MaxQuant was going into LFQ Analyst. So that's basically the pipeline we used for teaching, and that worked exceptionally well, where they just got that protein groups file, shoved it into LFQ Analyst, and got that output from Anup's wonderful platform. That thing rocks. So yeah, And they really like the outputs that they got out of those things.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Nice. Tara, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, I might have missed it. You said that they were master's students, but I was just wondering if you could put what context the students are coming from, and to some extent, how much background they have about the fundamental mass spec experiment versus just kind of understanding the bioinformatics side of things.
Before they get to my subject, none. So these are Masters of Medical Biotechnology students. They come from a wide, diverse range of backgrounds, but they have to have some kind of background in biomolecular science. So they need to have done biochemistry, or they need to know, what's a protein, what's a gene, those kind of things. We don't assume anything beyond that. And so they not only do they do the subject in proteomics, they do advanced microscopy, they do flow cytometry, and they do genomic subjects as well. So yes, I have to go back and actually tell them this is what a mass spectrometer is, this is how it works, so on and so forth. So they get all of that information before they would go into the laboratory to do their sample prep and all of that kind of stuff. They don't get to physically drive the instruments themselves, no. So we take them on the tour and say, this is what it is, this is how it works, stuff goes in here, this is what it generates. They look at all of the data and things like that. So they know all of that stuff. And then they're able to analyze their data in that context.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That was awesome. We've been doing a similar sort of thing, but using the free mascot version. So in third year, I teach proteomics and metabolomics to third year students. And yeah, we do for the metabolomics, we let them bring in their own sample and of tea or coffee, and then we do GCMS metabolomics on their extracts and use a web-based platform, Metabolomics Express, to do the teaching, a bit like that. But I wonder, like, if it might be possible with Biocommons to kind of set up, like, sort of open source these types of teaching exercises that people have developed. Like, if we wanted to go from doing mascot to copying what you're doing, kind of thing, would that be something you'd be open to? Kind of trying to make a teaching package that can go out and everyone can use?
Me personally, no. Yeah, I would have no problem doing that at all. I mean, the lectures that I do in my subject end up on YouTube, free for the universe. I'm not sure what the university stand would be on this, because they want to attract students into the program and have them come through and pay their money to do that. But the altruistic side of me says, yes, those are the kind of things that we should be doing. And I think that's probably something that we can also do with the Biocommons, would be to, within this core facility group, we could all get together and say, well, okay, here's a set of training packages that we can use where, we agree on the kinds of things that we think that they should use. I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, I guess we could teach them fundamental stuff that goes across a whole lot of things, because we all have our different ways of doing sample preparation, and we've all got our different ways of setting up instruments and running instruments, and we've all got different flavors of instruments and our analysis pipeline at the back. But I don't see why we couldn't come up with something that the fundamentals that are common to everything that we do. Yeah. Which is something that I try and do in the subject, where I don't know what instrument platform they're going to go out and use. I try and be agnostic about that. Yeah.
Maybe I can respond. So that's definitely the types of activities the Biocommons wants to support. So, obviously Galaxy is our flagship service, and it's kind of supported because it's this part of this international collaboration. So we actually have access to those fantastic Galaxy Training Network materials, but we also contribute to those. So, they're developed globally. So that's we obviously want to be able to contribute to that. I'm pretty sure Mascot isn't on Galaxy because it's commercial, I think. But the Biocommons also, we do work with groups who do want to develop up and roll out national training. So we have a training team. We've run over, I'm not sure, in the last 2 years, we've run definitely over 100 events. A lot of them are webinars, but a lot of them are workshops. We ran one yesterday in a genome annotation system. We had some trainers joining us live from Europe. We had some from Australia. So, if we can, and we might have a breakout room about training later. Definitely development of materials for a community is something we want to support. So yes, it's definitely on the table.
And
I think it's, oh, sorry, go Adam.
I was just going to say, it'd be really great to have materials, but even one step further than that would be to turn these workflow engines like Galaxy, as well as having inline help explaining what each node does or whatever, actually go one step further and make it into a teaching tool where teaching and exercises to learn the thing. Like some software, when you first start it up, it'll give you a little sort of interactive exercise where you actually use the software in a guided way through an exercise with some example data. Something like that would be a really nice step forward to turn these tools, as well as just routine tools, but into actual interactive teaching tools where you just kind of press play and it's all guided for you, and the teaching is automated in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's without the actual automation, that's kind of how the tutorials in Galaxy actually work, where it basically says, okay, you're going to need to download these files and they're on this particular thing. And you don't actually need to download anything to your computer if you don't want to, because Galaxy can go, okay, well, that repository, I've got to pull that to this server and so it does take you through those steps and says, okay, get this data, do this next, do this next, do this next. And that works really, really well. But the point I was going to make was we can use this group as a way of, or a subset of this group with Johan and Jeff to come together and try and develop that idea. I think it's a very valid idea. I think it's got legs. And just a matter of getting a group of us together and saying, okay, how are we going to do this? And consult with the community.
Yeah, I've just popped a note in there too. I mean, again, Galaxy, it is great because it has so many functions. It does support interactive tours. So if one was to go down that path, the functionality is already there. We can just build a new interactive tour.
Great. Thanks everyone for all the questions. In the interest of time, we'll move on to the poll now. So I'll hand over to Jeff, who's going to take us through the poll.
Thanks, Johan. So we're planning to have some breakout rooms in the second half of this session. And really, we wanted to get, I guess, a gauge of what people would like to talk about, to work out what breakout rooms we might have and who might want to go to each. So we just have a very short poll, and I guess we've heard a little bit about already open source versus commercial. And if I can share my screen, there's a link, I think, in the meeting chat. Can you see the screen? So there's a URL. Could someone put it in the chat maybe?
Yep, I've dropped it into the chat, Jeff.
Great. So pollev.com/JC936, and I'll just go on to the first. All right, so we were interested in your facility. What's your mix of proprietary versus open source software? So from exclusively proprietary through to exclusively open source. We'll just leave this up for a short time. Seems I should be able to see how many people have voted, but I can't. But I'll wait until those bars stop changing, which they seem to have stopped changing. So you've got 10 more seconds before we move on to the next one. So it seems like mostly proprietary with some open source, and then we have roughly equal proprietary and open source with, yep. Okay, thank you. Oop, still moving. I think even if I move on to the next slide, you can still answer the previous question. So we'll move on. Thanks for that. And I think that does impact the types of work we can, consider doing. All right, the next question, oops, people have already started. How much of the bioinformatics analysis workflow does your facility usually do for clients? So I understand, there's groups that pretty much do everything. The client submits the samples and you generate a report. Some do some of it, but the client does need to perform some of the analysis themselves. That seems to be the major one. So I think that would be interesting to discuss how that spread goes across that. And very few people do very little of the bioinformatics analysis. And I guess the reason why we're interested in this question is, we understand that as a facility, your time is very precious, and anything that can be done to, I guess, speed up your work or to make, routine tasks faster or more efficient, so you can concentrate on the interesting stuff, is valuable. So I think that that's certainly something we may want to discuss as well. All right, thank you. Just move on to the next slide now. Oh, here we go. What are your biggest challenges in providing the level of bioinformatics support that your clients require? There's been quite a few there already, so just go. Time, limited personnel, time, funding, getting them to understand that experimental design is the most crucial step, slow processing. There's a lot of time, so that would be maybe an interesting thing to pick apart in one of our rooms, perhaps. What does that actually mean? Data infrastructure, yep. Client's not sure what they want. Oops, time, staff, hardware. IT support infrastructure. Again, that would be quite interesting to find out who is providing IT support structure, I think, for some of these facilities. All right. Thank you. That seems to have stopped. So in the interest of time, we'll keep on moving. This is really that we thought that these could be our breakout rooms. So tools and workflows, and really that's getting to sort of portable tools and workflows, I think, across and between facilities. Information sharing, shared platforms are things like Galaxy. So these are computational platforms, obviously. And then the training. And as I said, we certainly can help with that. If you can think of other things, please say other, and then, pop them in the chat, and we can decide which way we go. So I guess for the organisers, we're going to move into breakout rooms shortly, and we can decide how many we want to go into. I think Johan, myself, Ben and Ralph had volunteered to facilitate some discussion in each of those. I don't know if we want to think about picking apart time as well. So
I'm wondering whether time can fit in under one of these categories. Given how popular it was, maybe we could replace one of these.
Yeah, or I would argue that time's integral to almost all of them. I mean, it's such an open concept.
Yeah. So maybe it'll come out of the discussions in those other. Let me just stop sharing that screen. All right. Okay. thanks for that. So I guess it looks like we have enough interest across all of those. Now, who's organising the breakout rooms? Is it Ben?
Yeah,
because
so we've got Alex on standby to create.
Yeah, I'm on that.
Excellent. So I think we're going to have 4 breakout rooms. I'll just share the screen again.
Yeah, we just need to list which rooms which.
Yeah, so portable tools and workflows will be room 1. Information sharing will be room 2. Shared platforms room 3. And training room 4. Now, Johan, who do you want to go and to facilitate in each of those rooms?
So I'll be in room number 1. Jeff, if you could join room number 3. And Ben and Ralph, do you have a preference for 2 or 4?
Either.
I'm happy to go with 4. Bioinformatics.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. And then Ben, you'll be in room 2.
Excellent. Now, I'm just going to put this chat into the this link into the chat, everybody. And this is something called Jamboard. It's just really a virtual like post-it note thing, and we're gonna sort of have a discussion, but also we want to get people to put things into the thing. So what we can do is add a sticky note. So there's this little symbol here. You can just write whatever and save that, and we can they basically just go on there, and then we can move them around and use it as a discussion piece. So I'll put the chat in, I'll stop sharing, and I will see whoever's interested in shared platforms in room 3. So just to remind you, room 1 is tools and workflows with Johan. Room 2 is information sharing with Ben. Room 3 is shared platforms with me, and room 4 is bioinformatics training with Ralph. So I think, Alex, I guess we need to set a time in the rooms, and we'll come back and have a little bit of a debrief before we end.
Yep. How long would you like in the rooms?
Let's set it for 15 minutes, and that'll give us enough time for the wrap up, I think.
Perfect. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Alex.
Sorry?
And I'll put the Jamboard link in the chat.
All those rooms are open now.
Thank you. All right, and the Jamboard link is in the chat now. I'm not actually sure how to join the room. Does anybody?
Yeah, open up the breakout room option, and then in the little thing, there'll be a little join option up along the top of the line.
Oh, you've got to click over the number. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in this breakout room, or am I here on my own?
Hi, Alex.
I think you're in the unlucky position to.
Yeah, I was going to say no. So I'm not sure whether to sit here politely or I'm thinking of buggering off and joining the shared computational, which looks pretty equally unloved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's one that hasn't joined the group, but I don't know how. But you always get the you kind of at your computer kind of thing. So I think everyone else managed to get there.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, do you want to go and join whichever one takes your fancy?
Yeah.
I'll yeah, I was going to say shared is looking pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Join that. See you in a tick.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought I'd gate crash this one as no one likes breakout room number 2. So
Oh, no one went in there.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Maybe I'll let you guys continue and then join once I've been ready.
Yeah. But yeah, as I was saying, like, yeah, predominantly it was like a local server sitting under your desk and people are doing their analysis on that. But yeah, all the RAM requirement and compute requirement is exceeding. So people are also moving to like Linux-based softwares, so people can easily deploy them over over the HPCs and things like that, and do parallel processing of their tools. But yeah, I'm just interested to see what are those shared computational platforms that are available for Australian researchers. And because most of the times what we do is like either spin up some virtual machines on Nectar and because we have some dedicated Windows servers as well. So we have a mix of both, but now like we are thinking to move away from them because like they are expensive and then you have to maintain it. So you have to have some dedicated person if something goes wrong. And also you have to deal with university IT facility every time they do patching and everything. It's such a time sink and time waste most of the time to like add users, remove users, and things like that. So yeah, if there's some shared computational platform that people can use, or if we can direct most of our clients to, then yeah, I'm interested to hear that I don't know about.
Thanks. So I've been sort of listening to you and paraphrasing what you've said and put some sticky notes in there. So please, elaborate on that, and we can certainly get back to that. Clifford, did you want to say why what drew you to this room?
Yep. So my two main concerns sort of follow on from what was said before. We would like to use both proprietary and open source software in an HPC setting. We have thought about using Galaxy, and we have an HPC facility at our own university, but we understand that most of that can only run open source software. So
where are you based?
In University of South Australia in Adelaide. And we have thought about trying to go and migrate to either into more of a server based area or even cloud computing for some of our projects. They're quite hard to implement because universities are very tight on their computers and their data requirements. And if we were to go to the cloud, we probably might have to get someone that's bioinformatics based, and that may not be an option.
Do you mean to set up the environment in the cloud? You don't have the sort of admin experience or Yep.
Yeah. At least in our group, we don't have someone that's very, let's say, bioinformatics focused or IT focused. Yeah.
Yep.
And the second point would be is that if we were to think about integrating the different types of omics data, so let's say metabolomics and proteomics data, it's kind of just do what needs to be done with whatever software you can find and try and patch it all together. I think maybe perhaps a more streamlined or a more streamlined workflow might be more appropriate, and especially will help future people who want to go down that path. Those are the two things that I would like to say.
Excellent. And the cross omics. So the you were saying that there was some challenges with I think the uni IT. Oh, it's so was that?
Yeah.
Was that around? Can you just tease that out a bit more? Was that?
Yeah. So I guess it's. I think I'm just trying to remember, like, in terms of how you store the data or how secure it is, and that's obviously a problem if you want to go to cloud computing. Can you ensure that? Or
And when you're talking cloud, are you talking Nectar cloud or commercial cloud?
We're thinking commercial, but that we're thinking of something like Oracle or AWS, but but that may be just I think it might be too difficult for me.
No, we actually have one of the things we're trying to do is really enable better access to commercial cloud. I mean, someone has to pay, but making things easier to actually get onto the cloud is something we're very interested in. And we have a whole stream of work. We're working with Amazon, not Oracle, not yet, but Azure and Amazon, and not Google Cloud yet either, but they'll come on board. And is that Oracle? I know UniSA or Adelaide maybe South Australia generally there was like access to all of these companies kind of have a bit of it's like the gateway drug, like a free credit where they give you some. Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. Good.
They have research proposals and
yes. Okay. Yeah.
We kind of used to have that, but then the university soon realized that it's not viable for them. So no.
It's interesting because it depends on the uni, and some have seen the light, and I know that the University of Sydney is very much Amazon based, and if you talk to the Sydney Uni IT folks, they actually say the Amazon bill, most of it is on the administrative data. The research data actually is nothing, which I find hard to believe. So they're actually, now you've got the inside information, Ben. So go for it.
Because they're always moaning about how big the data storage bill is.
Michael, did you want to comment on your...
So sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So maybe if we just pick up on that point. So I'm at Melbourne, and they've actually been really good. I think particularly, I think they've really expanded in that area in the last year or two. And so it's been really helpful for us. They sort of have I'm not exactly sure how it works under the hood, but there's sort of like an AWS type infrastructure that we have access to, which is completely paid for by someone pays for it, but it's not our labs. So I'm not sure someone's paying for it, but so the university made that available to us. It kind of looks like the Nectar Research Cloud, like platforms.
Oh, is it Ronan?
They don't call it that. They call it MRC, like Melbourne Research Cloud or something.
Okay. Yep.
So that's been quite good. So so I'm the sort of the computery bioinformatics IT guy in our lab, and so I sort of set up a bunch of processing stuff using that, which has been really helpful for us. Another thing which is sort of I saw in that little poll thing that we were doing before, people complaining about data storage. That was something that we used to sort of struggle with a little bit. We had this sort of, you know, gangster like cardboard box full of old hard drives sitting on the floor of Nick's office, which was always fun if we needed to go and find something. But yeah, again, it was something that I think consistently across the university people were complaining about. And so, you know, one of the gods of the place decided that there should be a better solution. And so there's sort of a centralized, centrally managed, like massive.
Oh yeah, the petascale campus.
Yeah, exactly.
initiative.
And so there's something ridiculous like 6 or some number of petabytes of storage space that you sort of apply for access, and then you can just use it that way. A lot of the ways that you interact with it is through a thing called media flux.
Yes.
And so which is actually really useful. And there's a group within the university, I think they're called Research Data Solutions or something like that.
Services, yep.
Yeah, Research Data Service. And they sort of built a layer on top of that in collaboration with some external company, Architecta or something.
Yep.
That lets us. So one of the problems that we have was, how do we send people their data? Like if someone's generated 50 gigabytes of stuff, how do we transfer them that? We used to use CloudStor a lot, but that had sort of weird quirks. Whereas now we've got some thing that sort of interacts with our storage partition on this, you know, petascale campus thing, and then lets us sort of basically just email people a link where they can download the files that we sort of tag for them. Yep. And it's actually been fantastic.
We have out of time.
Sure.
Jeff, how do you want to continue the questions or?
I think it's really useful to hear this. And, you know, I guess because some of the platforms might, I mean, if the group wants to talk more about, you know, generalized things like commercial solutions and moving data around, that's also absolutely in scope. So yeah, how much longer do we have? Just
I'm not sure whether we started quite on time, but
right,
the session it was meant to finish at 15:15.
Oh right, so we're out of time.
Yep.
To
put it bluntly.
Well, I guess we're out of time. So what I would say though is the Jamboard that we have, please, you know, it's open, please add comments directly into it. You can all edit it. I've just edited some stuff, so please change that. The other thing we didn't get to was the green, and it's about, oh, we're going to get kicked out in 56 seconds. The green ones are about what approaches you think we might, you know, use to address this stuff. And obviously, you know, Johan and I will pore over this and talk about it with Ralph and Ben and get back to the group. This isn't our last opportunity to speak.
Yeah. I think we can probably have a kind of wrapping up bit and encourage people to Jamboard on.
Yes, good idea. Great. All right, well, any last comments in the last 20 seconds?
I would just like to chip in that one of the issues is getting things updated easily on a communal system is always the fear I have. So
yep.
That's my reticence with joining.
Okay, good.
I'll put in a couple of stickers on other things that are on my.
Welcome back, everyone. How are your breakout sessions?
Very good.
Life-changing.
Too short. We barely got going and it was time to end.
Much too short. So what we might do before we wrap up is I might ask the moderators for each room just to give a 30-second summary of what was talked about. For room one, the kinds of stuff that were spoken about were a handoff point from proprietary processing through to open source. and if it's possible to actually make customizable workflows that fit in with that model. Having basic through to advanced workflows, depending on your experience with analysis. The ability to compose workflows if you understand the basic operations that you need within proteomics. So you can basically assemble them based on a category for individual tools. And also the difficulties surrounding commercial or sensitive data. And so basically that you can't just go and use any platform because there are restrictions around how you have to manage that data. So Ben, you were in room 2, yes?
Yeah, so I've got a really short report, and I'm trying not to take this personally, but no one else joined the room. So I went and gate crashed Jeff's room.
Oh no. So Jeff, what happened in room 3?
Well, it wasn't my room, it was our room, can I just say. So I think the discussion sort of veered away from probably shared platforms and kind of more about features of shared infrastructure. And I think, there was a recognition that there is a mixture of, commercial and open source software, but, as data sizes have grown, preliminary analysis, it's still kind of done in a lot of Windows-based software that needs to run on a desktop or something. And as data sizes has grown and numbers of samples has grown, that's not really up to it. So we ended up talking quite a bit about commercial cloud. And I think there's a bit of a division between some universities, maybe groups of 8 that have access to cloud resources through their research infrastructure locally, and maybe other universities that aren't in that group. So I think there's an equity challenge there. We did talk about that the Biocommons has a program called BioCloud, which is just sort of getting off the ground. But, when we're, Johan showed a slide that shows we're sort of interacting with a lot of, federally funded computational providers, but we're also starting to talk to the commercial providers. So, what we want to do is explore ways we can make that commercial cloud compute more accessible. And, we can provide some updates on that at some time. I think, I think that's, the other thing was around, challenges probably with sending data to clients, back to clients, and some challenges, but also we talked about some solutions that various institutions have set up. So I think the main thing we can probably explore further is that the concept of like cloud computing, I think.
Thanks, Jeff. And Ralph?
Okay, so look, 30 seconds just. I think we had also a very, very good discussion about the bioinformatics training on Galaxy. I think that the very nice thing to say is about it. We had a few people in the breakout room that use Galaxy quite a bit, and everybody is quite happy with what Galaxy offers with regards to the training space. And there was not much that people actually thought, needs to be done or added, because it actually everything works quite well. There are 2 things came up. So one was, one was just a suggestion that it would be nice, that the biggest challenge is not necessarily analyzing the data, but then once you have to analyze data, what do you do with it? How do you extract, biological information out of it? So this was mentioned, that if training sessions, if something like tools would exist that actually teach what do you do with the data. I mean, I know it's a very open-ended and difficult thing, but this would, some people, thought that it would be nice if something like this exists on Galaxy as well. And another thing the other thing that was mentioned was that, fully appreciative of the fact that Galaxy is not supporting proprietary software packages, it would be at least nice to maybe, for certain questions, have links and this available to other software packages that currently are not on Galaxy, so that users who might want to use different software packages can just, click the link and get out of Galaxy into, and get information on what's out there in addition to what's on Galaxy.
Thanks, Ralph. So So look, I know those breakout sessions were really, really short. They seemed like 5 minutes, not 15 to me. But I think that just means that there actually is a lot to unpack. And so what I'd just like to say is thanks everyone for coming along. Next steps, please do, if you're interested in continuing the conversation, you can join our Google groups. But you know, this is a very tight-knit community as well. And so if you do have questions, if there's something you're really passionate about and you want to talk more about these challenges or any potential solutions you see, you know, don't hesitate to contact me directly as well. So thanks again, Ben and Ralph. And
no, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks Johan, thanks Jeff, thanks Ben for a great session. Look, we are running slightly behind, so maybe if we can just have a 5-minute break and convene shortly after 1/2 so maybe 32, 33. And then we go on with the last and final session. Okay, see you then. Thanks everyone.
Are you talking to me, Paul? How you going? You're on mute if you were. Hi. question for anybody that's currently using Galaxy. Do you get the entire max quant analysis text folder out of it? Does anybody know that? I haven't used it in a while.
No, you just get what you specify when you set the search up. So, you know, if you want protein groups, it'll only give you that. I think there's 6 or 7 different things that you can get out of it, but it's certainly not that entire folder that you have on the desktop version. No, not at all. I don't know where that stuff goes.
It should theoretically be there. My point would be for all those people that were asking about, like, you know, what's the next step once you have your analysis folder and going to biological information, not talking to all those people that have, you know, organisms that are non-model organisms, but like human and mouse and all that sort of jazz. You'd be able to take your output files, your raw files, upload them into mass dynamics, for example, and then you've got your biological pathway analysis automated, besides using LFQ analyst, which is great, but also you'd have the mass dynamics pathway as well there for those that want to see volcano plots of pathways and that. But either way.
I mean, I guess it depends on what you want, because you certainly get the protein groups file. You can set it to get the evidence file. And then I think it's just like MSMS or MS3 or, yeah, there's only a handful down at the bottom that you can select. I think it's about 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think before we disappear down the max quant rabbit hole, we better move on to the final session of today. So this one is entitled the Australasian Core Facilities Initiatives session, and it gives Ralph and I a chance to talk about some of the things that we've been working on this year under the ACF umbrella. And that largely boils down into 2 topics, the annual survey, which I'll be talking on, and then Ralph has been busy working this year with many of you on a sort of benchmarking or multi-site testing initiative. So he'll be talking on that in the second half of this session. So without any further ado, let me share my screen. And so you can get some slides. Excellent. All right, so I'm going to try and stick to time, and for the next 20 minutes talk about the 2021 Australasian Core Facilities Survey.
Ben, I think you're muted, Ben.
Fix that.
Here we go. Yep.
I'm struggling with at the moment is getting the slides to change, which for some reason locked up. Here we go. Making headway. So I'm going to kick off with my acknowledgements. So particularly want to thank my co-chair for making these meetings happen, and the original protagonists of the survey were Paula Burton and Mark Pandina, who did the heavy lifting of putting together the initial survey, and then at the following 2 ACF meetings, the content was further refined and evolved. And I also particularly want to thank our brave beta testers, so Matt, Tara, and Nick, who try and get as many of the bugs out of it before it goes out to everyone. And for this year, I want to thank the 37 facilities who returned a complete survey. And it's quite, for those of you who have done it, you know that it's quite an extensive survey. And so it's a fair amount of work to submit a full set of answers. And locally at this end, I want to particularly thank Naveed, who has done a lot of the work putting together the more colourful and informative graphs that interpret the data. And if anyone's got any questions, then feel free to email me after the session if you want more information. So as I say, this is our 3rd round of this survey. It was open during July this year, was the time window for people to submit their responses. And the big slice of the questions are all focused on the 2020 calendar year, so January to December 2020 is the data that we're looking at. 48 facilities were invited to participate, and 37 of those, as I say, returned responses. And this is the first year we've invited facilities in New Zealand to join, and I particularly want to give a shout out to the 6 of those facilities that sent back surveys, whilst at the same time I want to give our colleagues over in WA a bit of a kick and a prod, because they missed out on the action this year, so we've got no idea what's going on in WA. But as you can see from the logos here, we've got a great coverage of the eastern side of Australia and New Zealand. So the survey runs in a red cap architecture for those who are interested in what's going on under the bonnet, and is split over 8 sections. And I don't have time to cover all of them today, but I'm going to be pulling information from these sections to try and draw together a picture. A lot of the real interest comes from when you can take a number of different questions and pull that together to try and answer some of those questions that we all face about how to run a facility and where the challenges lie and what can we do, what's the best way, is there a better way of operating? So on that note, let's jump in, and just at the beginning, start off with a sort of a bird's eye view of the data set. So if we take, for example, the MOOC-spec facility, and what the average facility looks like from this survey. So it'd be a weird hybrid of 2/3 university facility, 1/3 research institute, with a thin sliver of other these days. You'd have nearly 5 staff members, 2 of which would be academic, 3 would be professional, and then you'd have this weird sliver of an administrator aiding your day-to-day operations. You'd have 2 QTOF platforms, 1.5 triple pods, and then there's kind of mongrel Orbitrap tribrid bit of hardware making up part of it, and you'd be in with a 50-50 chance that one of those instruments in 2020 would be brand new. Around 10% or just under 10% of the MOOC-spec facilities would have an official accreditation, and 13% would be planning on getting accreditation during 2020. And one of the interesting one of the interesting gains of running the survey every year is we can look back between the different data sets, and I know 2020 was a challenging year for everyone, but not many of the people who were planning that year to get accreditation successfully managed it by the next survey. So if anyone's thinking of accreditation, allow plenty of time. We've not gone down that route. I'm sure it's a challenge to complete. So moving into the billing section, it's one of the early questions in the survey, and we asked people to estimate the percentage of their revenue coming in, whether it's a fee for service, whether that's per hour or per sample basis. Do they have a subscription model, which is the areas in green, or do they operate a self-service model where they're training the users, they're allowing people onto the tools, and they're billing that either by the hour or by the sample. So when you look at that result, one of the bits that sort of jumps out initially is you kind of feel, wow, there's no 2 facilities are the same. Everyone's got a different way of doing it, but there are patterns within the data. So this the kind of top segment here, as we've ranked them, do self-service. And so that's, as I say, the train the user or the research hotel model, typically by billing per hour. And then they have an increasing amount of fee-for-service elements that sort of come in during that. So we've got a sort of tapering ratio. You then get this sort of central part of the plot of the facilities that are taking that classic fee-for-service model. So they're not really letting the users in the door, but it's a hand your sample over, hopefully with that chat about what the experimental design was beforehand, and then they're billing either by per sample or predominantly by per hour by the looks of this. The pale orange is the per hour billing. The next slice of the sandwich, should we say, is the subscription model. So something Nick Williamson gave a very spirited defense of the subscription model. And we can see how there's two facilities that are absolutely 100% dedicated this way, and a couple of facilities that are largely subscription. And there's definitely merits to that approach. And then the other one that we need to mine down more in future meetings. So the base of our sandwich, the other slice of bread, is this other section. And predominantly this would appear to be other equals free. So these are they're very much the in-house facility, and they only provide services to those within their institution, and they don't do cost recovery in the way that a lot of core facilities do. So linked to billing is, we were asked people, what are the drivers when you want to set your fees? And so if we focus on this, the right-hand side, the number one driver when setting the rates is aiming to try and cover the direct costs. Well, that's quickly followed by what will the host institute be willing to subsidize as a predominant one. And then there's a degree of what will the market bear, what can you charge and get away with. A few facilities do have a more profit-focused aspect to them, and they'll be trying to maximize the profit. And then there's a couple of facilities who take other drivers, are the ones that the dominant way of how they set their user fees. The flip side of this in the pie chart is we also ask people, of the user fees they get in, where are they actually from? So even though people are trying to cover direct costs, the user fees that they get only form a small proportion of their, cover a small proportion of their costs. The predominant slice of the pie is still host subsidy. So that's obviously the second driver, but it's the lion's share of where the user fees come from. And then people are bringing in fees from a range of other options, including federal grants, state grants, philanthropy, and charity contributions. So this year we added in a new question where we were asking people to actually volunteer the dollar amount that their revenue was. So whilst 37 completed the survey, only 23 opted to disclose or had the numbers available for their dollar revenue. And the revenue per facility, there was a huge range from $13,000 up to $5 million. A note to self is I've got to put a footnote into the survey to clarify what we mean by revenue. I have a feeling that this 5 million is probably the grant income of the facility, not necessarily a classic fee for access arrangement. And we can look at the revenue in a number of different ways. And certainly it scales pretty broadly. The more mass spectrometers you have, the more revenue you bring in. The median value per mass spectrometer is around $32,000. And there's quite an interesting correlation where if you look at the number of staff within a facility and the revenue per mass spectrometer, I mean, if you were doing a calibration curve with the standards, you got an R value of 0.71, you'd probably think there's something wrong with your mass spec. But this sort of soft social science analysis, I think there's definitely a distinct correlation that if you wanted to boost your revenue, don't add more mass specs, add more staff would be my take home from this one. The other question we ask people is what happens to the revenue they bring in? And the vast bulk of it goes to reducing that deficit. As I think many of us know, we tend to run at a deficit, and it's just how much can you offset through your revenue. A few facilities do get to spend their revenue as they see fit, and the very lucky few get to be able to carry money over from one year to the next, which certainly for those in the university sector is a rarity. We also asked the facilities whether they have a annual revenue target, and just over half do. And how did that target change for 2021 relative to 2022? So most people, the revenue target remains the same. Just over a quarter, it goes up. Their revenue target went up, and there are a few facilities where they're expecting a downturn in revenue for this year. Now, very few people get the magic blank slate or blank checkbook where there are no financial constraints. And so we ask people, how do they deal with those financial constraints, particularly the last couple of years where many places have been in a very tight financial situation. And the most common answer is they delay particularly equipment purchases. So that's a big commitment for most facilities. And if they delay that, then that's a way of dealing with the shortfall in the available finances. This is also followed with the common one of trying to increase utilization and therefore bring more user fees in through the door, or you delay infrastructure spending, increasing pricing is an option, reducing the range of services that you have available. Some people have no financial constraints, and that's ranked as the middle ranking answer. A few facilities are going down the more drastic approach of reducing staff, postponing research projects, reducing prices, which is presumably an effort to try and increase utilization. And the last option that people volunteered were subcontracting out services as a way of defraying costs. So we look at the staff makeup of facilities. This was, again, it's quite a big section of the survey, and this is quite a busy slide, so we'll work through it sort of step by step. So overall, out of the total responses, there are 175 full-time equivalent staff covered by the survey, and the staffing number per facility ranges from, there's one facility that said none, the smallest number was 0.4 FTE, right up to 29 FTE. I can see Adam smiling at that one. What would you do with 29 staff? Amazing. There is interestingly no real correlation between the number of staff and the number of mass spectrometers. There's a very wide range. And again, we asked people to volunteer what their staff costs were for the facility. And if we look at that on a per FTE basis, out of the 29 responding facilities, the average member of staff costs just over $114,000. And we do look at the gender breakdown. So that's the first column here. And over all the staff, it's a almost perfectly balanced gender division. There's a slight skew if we look at our academic members of staff. There's a male skew there. And in the administrative staff, there's quite a strong female skew in there. But amongst the professional staff, it's a balanced gender split. The last part within the staff section that we ask is we ask what sort of contract people are on. And just over 40% are on a continuing contract. And that does correlate more with the professional staff. The academics more commonly are on a fixed term position, which maybe just reflect their role as the administrative head of that unit, being on a fixed term. And on this survey, we saw 5% of the staff are casuals, which is up from certainly last year's survey. And one of the last questions in this section that we asked was how many of the staff are expected to apply for grant funding, and it's around half of staff. So I thought I couldn't leave out the software data given the Viacomms session we had before. So we've split it up by application area, and if we look at the proteomics packages, MaxQuant is a sniff ahead of Proteome Discover as the most popular proteomics platform. And within this top cluster of over 20 installations per facility, reported across the survey, we've got PeakView, ProteinPilot, Mascot, and a new entry that only came in this year, DIA-NN, and we can see that's already in the top tier of proteomics platforms. And I imagine when we come to do next year's survey, is it going to overtake MaxQuant, or is the new version of MaxQuant going to come back and stomp all over DIA-NN as the method of choice for those new workflows? So it's going to be interesting to see how that battle settles. And then there's quite a long list of other applications that people are at least have available to their users, even if they haven't got a clear picture of the level of utilization across these different packages. If we look on the metabolomics side, particularly within the targeted section, you can see how Skylines are clear, head and shoulders above every other package. They'll be one of the most popular platforms, with some of the old school packages like Pole Browser, Freestyle are popular. Compound Discoverer is probably one of the Mass Hunter, the lead proprietary packages in this area. And just down the bottom here, our last segment is the mass spectrometry imaging software packages, where Skills is the dominant platform, with the Waters HDI package second place in that area. So that gives us a view of what software people are using. So now, what sort of instrument do people have? So we just look at the total instruments across all facilities surveyed. Unsurprisingly, triple quads or Q-traps are the #1 platform, the most common platform installed, but only a snifter ahead of QTOF instruments. And with black bars, this was another new question for this year, is we asked people, out of those instruments that they have, how many had some form of ion mobility. So we tried to include every possible type of ion mobility that's available. And so this inner segment is, you can clearly see how QTOF is the most popular platform for ion mobility too. And then the next two are either the Q-Exactive or Explorer style Orbitraps, or the Tribrid Orbitrap ion trap protocol instruments. And again, there's a reasonable number, but it's still a small number of the total, proportion of the total that have an ion mobility aspect to those platforms. And then we get a single quads are pretty popular, followed by this sort of tail of TOF, ion traps, FDICR platforms, and other. So if we look at the instruments by facility, one bit that certainly struck me as well, so there's a big range in the number of instruments per facility. You rarely get an instrument at facility. Here's one of the exceptions where they go all down one platform, and generally almost as soon as you get into 2 mass specs, you go 2 of a different type, you get 3. So people will always try and diversify the platforms available, more than just going all in on one particular technology footprint. And then the last sliver here on this side of the graph, the mirror side of the graph, is what was new in 2020. So this is installations happened during 2020. And as you can see, about half of the facilities were able to get a new platform that year. A few were up to 3 within the one, but normally it's just a smattering, adding an instrument here and an instrument there. So we also asked people what they decommission. So on one hand, it reflects that proportion of instruments that are available. So the sort of things that are going out are the older QTOFs, the older Q-traps within the facility, and then reflecting that, the older Orbitraps and even Tribrid platforms. I think we're getting a slight overrepresentation of TOFs, which are a minority platform, but obviously they're beginning to show their age now and sort of disappearing as a platform, as well as presumably all the single points. And if we look at the breakdown of what got installed in 2020, it doesn't quite follow that the distribution. We've got Q-traps are the biggest installations of 2020, followed by Orbitraps and QTOS. So you can see where people are. I guess if you looked at it in dollar terms, then there's probably as many dollars spent here as there is in the protocol section. We didn't ask people that, but we did ask them what type of purchase, and 3/4 of people are buying new instruments. One facility went for 2 second-hand instruments as a way of making their research dollars stretch a bit further. And some people have traded in, some people lease, some people receive a seed instrument. The last part, we asked people on their instrument purchases, where was the funding coming from? And the vast majority of it comes from the host institute, with a portion of that coming by recycling user fees. Philanthropy plays a slightly bigger role here. Federal grants, and this just reflects where we're at in that kind of increase of RIIP cycle. Not a lot, only 3% of the funding came through that scheme, and then the thinnest sliver of the pie, state grants, as the last source of funding. So we just look at the age-old question about staffing, and that certainly came up in that question about having enough time to do things. And we try and look at the staff to equipment ratio. So here we've ranked all of the responses by staff ratio, and a few facilities have a very high ratio of 3 staff per mass spectrometer. And if we look at the top 4 here, where they've all got over 2 staff per mass spectrometer, and you look at the other answers that are given to the survey, it seems to correlate broadly with obviously a dedication to fee-for-service work. And there's also a bias towards commercial contracts and overseas customers. So the profile of these top 4 facilities, the average facility, that spec facility, has 2 members of staff for every 3 mass spectrometers. But as we can see, there's a long tail of facilities where the staffing is stretched pretty thin, and then you got at most half down to a fraction, someone trying to support multiple mass specs, which certainly for these guys here, 2 staff and 10 mass specs. Those guys have got their work cut out, although not as much as the bottom one, where there's no staff reported and for instruments. All right, so moving on towards the end of this, so I just want to go too far over, is we looked at maintenance, and I was trying to tease out whether there was any correlation, again, between facilities that go predominantly for having instruments on full maintenance versus facilities that predominantly don't have prepaid cover, either the self-insuring or their own repairs, and staffing levels. And generally there's not. There's a few here where you can see these guys are above average number of staff and predominantly self-maintained. But then you've also got facilities where they have very few staff and don't go down the pre-made contracts. Again, this year we let people volunteer if they wanted to report the number of the actual dollar value of their maintenance contracts, and the mean cost per instrument comes out at around 36,000. But people do vary, and this is dollars per year per instrument, and that varies from over 80 to as low as 10. So the last segment of the survey is a bit more future focused and future forward looking. And again, another new question we asked this year is, out of all of these different areas, so things like proteomics, modificomics, HDX, tails, metabolomics, lipidomics, all these different application spaces, do you do it a lot, do it a bit, getting into it, would like it, no real plans, don't know, don't want it, or even worse, had it and shut it down? So this is the as you head out, the more view of it. And so we can see there's definitely a cluster of a lot of facilities do proteomics, obviously. But the bit that intrigued me is there's, as you can see from this sort of hairball, there's not a pattern. It's not like if you do proteomics, you inherently do a lot of modifications, or you do proteomics, you get into structural proteomics. And it's certainly fun to see how people are trying different areas, and there's still definitely no one facility that's the king of everything. Some other facilities have they have their specialization, and that's what they do. Whilst it's a very messy figure, this one, there's a lot of information buried within it that you can tease out. So just to summarize, the 2021 survey gives us a great snapshot now of the Australia-New Zealand mass spectrometry landscape. We're still quite skewed, obviously, to the omics-related facilities, but we have pretty broad coverage across all the different omics. And we do have this headache between the depth of the survey. I've only covered probably about half of it during this presentation, and the ease of collection. So I think that's one bit we have to always be trying to strike a balance as we move forward. Do we keep it as an extensive survey, or do we sacrifice depth for getting more people to respond? And just a word to all the people who did fill out the survey. I promise I'll get you your personalized reports now that I've got a bit more free time after this meeting, so you can get the full report of the findings. So on that, I'll open the floor for any questions.
Ben, I've got a question. I have to defend the honour of WA Proteomics because I don't think we actually received the survey. I was just checking, and so I know it was during COVID, and our Premier likes to keep everything out of the state people, but I didn't think he was checking our emails coming in, so I don't think I received it. So sorry about that one.
I can either send you the copy and you do it retrospectively.
Well, we can see where we fit anyway, but yeah.
Apologies for that.
That's right. Just one to think that we were, moochers and not pulling our weight.
Yeah.
Actually, Ben, I have one question. I mean, if you go, I don't know, what was the fourth or fifth slide where you're talking about the different fee for service versus, subscription-based models. There were so many responses that said others. Was this specified? What the answer other means? Do you know what kind of model those facilities running? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sorry, can you say that again? I'm not quite sure of the
one of the slides, I can't remember which slide it was, where you were talking about there are facilities that run, fee for service per hour model, fee for service per sample model. I thought one option was other as well. So facilities could answer other. Can you talk about this? What other means in this context?
Yeah. So out of the ones that did say other, well, I think there 3 or 4. A lot of people didn't specify what other actually was, but the people who did specify it was typically as they're free, so they don't actually cost recover. So they, within their facility, anyone who's a member of that organization can just rock up and get the analysis done. Which it's certainly an interesting model. I always feel the amount of money and effort we spend cost recovering, is a significant cost in its own right. If we didn't do it, it was just free. We on one hand be much more efficient, but one of my kind of counter arguments, just to get a little bit off topic on this, to the subscription model, is the headache with that subscription model is for the people who have paid up, it is free for them. And then that can encourage, I won't say profligate use, but less focused use. And certainly one of ours, even though we do almost exclusively per hour billing, still getting people to value the time on an instrument is an uphill struggle for us.
I can probably jump in there and own up to being one of the others at the bottom of that survey though. So I'm from University of Newcastle, and our other is that we are free currently to internal users. Our costs are maintained to some extent by requiring users to provide their own consumables. So that's their own columns. Anything that's not already bolted onto the instrument, they must provide for analysis. It is fantastic because it does break down a lot of barriers for access for researchers. Probably not the most sustainable model, and it's something we've found as we've grown from having just a couple of instruments to acquiring more and more over years. We are probably going to start transferring to a more cost recovery model to try and neutralise mostly the servicing costs.
Thanks for that. Do we have any other questions, comments? Ainsworths? Mina?
Yeah, Mina has a question. Yeah.
Yep, sorry. I'm also one of the others, and just thought I'd follow on with that. As Nathan was saying, we're funded, centrally from the research funds from the university, at Western Sydney University, and so yeah, all the users can just use the mass spec facility free of charge internally. And yeah, one of the biggest problems though is, I guess, triaging, because it's hard to then figure out how much usage is kind of fair, within groups or within schools, because we have the School of Medicine, we have School of Science, we have School of Engineering, all using the facility. And I mean, historically, there's I know how the usage trends go. We have usage data, but a subscription model, I think, is probably what we'll move to sooner or later. And I guess in that way, that the university will still, essentially, it'll still be free for the users, because they'll all be allocated some sort of research funding money that they can use to access the facility. And that way the schools can triage themselves, rather than it being kind of the job of the facility to figure out how much usage this group will get. And, someone comes with this massive experiment and hogs all the instrument time, you're trying to squeeze it all in. So it does become problematic when they have, free reign and they can make their experiments as big as they want almost. And you've got to try and schedule all of that, can be problematic.
You've got a question.
That's awesome, Ben. I really want to show some people around here some of your slides. Did you do much analysis on like the revenue, the average revenue you get per staff member? Because I'd really like to convince them that, we'll be better off financially if we have enough staff and are actually able to do more work and generate more revenue. But it seems like it's a downward spiral. If you don't meet your target, they take away staff member, and then it's even harder to meet your target. So there's got to be a sweet spot somewhere. Have you been thinking about how to identify what that sweet spot is and make a really compelling case for, being at that sweet spot and spending a bit of money to get there?
Yeah, I kind of slice the data dozens of different ways. Really stuck was if you weight it in terms of revenue per mass spec, just to normalize out the big facilities that mean big money. And then, yeah, there was that very strong correlation that the more staff you add, generally, the more revenue you're going to bring in, even though you're not adding more mass specs per se. And yeah, I'll be certainly trying that exact same argument with my superiors in the near future. I'll let you know how it goes. Unfortunately, it's still going to be a COVID known. But yeah, I think it's a very common cliche to say, our people are our greatest resource. But unfortunately, that rarely translates into hard funding. Right, Ralph, do we want to take Christopher's question, or?
Yeah, let's Christopher, and then we probably should move on.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks guys for this presentation today. It's been very illuminating. I find pricing and recovery and cost and all that sort of stuff to be my biggest bugbear. We want to provide excellent research outcomes for our researchers, and we track things like publications and grants, and that can be quite difficult in itself. being able to attribute grants and things, and particularly when publications might take 2 or 3 years to come out after the work is well and truly done. But we try and do that to demonstrate value, and we try and put a dollar value against publications so that, you know, people understand money as opposed to number of publications a lot better. In terms of our, I suppose, income, we try and cost recover all of our operating costs for our facility, and that poses some issues around, well, how do we price that? And we've moved away from a subscription model simply because we tend to get some large groups that tend to do a lot of work and consume a lot of the time and resourcing. And then the barrier to entry for smaller groups who just want to do a few samples is a lot greater. And so to that end, we've come up with our subscription model sort of changed to a prepayment model. So and we've got a number of options, but one option is to, for example, do X number of samples for a certain price. And there'll be internal pricing, external pricing for academics, and then commercial pricing as well. Internal pricing, of course, is subsidized. And then if they want to do, you know, twice as many samples, then there's another prepayment level that they can subscribe to, which reduces the cost per sample even further. And so I think, I can't remember exactly, but it somewhere goes from ranges from $130 or down to $100 per sample, but that's a full service. So that's, you know, give us your proteins, we'll extract it, prepare the peptides, do the analysis, do the data analysis, and hand you back your results. So that's the full service model for that sort of prepayment method. But we're also now moving to a cost per hour for instrument time as well. And I haven't quite worked out what that dollar value is, because it often depends on how many hours you're running the instrument for. And we're certainly not running at capacity at the moment. So there's still a fair bit of capacity, and we don't have issues with, you know, people, you know, wanting more time than what we can give them. But we're now starting to train up users so that they can independently run the instruments. The caveat being is that they've really got to be competent and regular if they're going to use that you know, self-service sort of model. And then we'll charge a cost per hour to run the instrument, and the service level is quite different. It's pretty much up to them. We'll maintain the instrument, but, you know, it's up to them to run their samples and stuff. And we're seeing a greater uptake in that. So yeah, so coming back to the subscription model, we find that's probably not as equitable as a consumption-based model.
Yeah, and I think they're very common themes for a lot of facilities. But I think perhaps in the interest of time, and that's a part of the conversation there, move on to Ralph to tell us all about his multi-site center testing initiative.
Okay, thanks. But maybe before I start, thanks, Christopher. I think I entirely agree, and I think it just highlights the fact that, you know, there is no real, no proper model. There's no correct model. It really it depends on what your host institution is willing to cover, you know. And I think subscription models work probably extremely well if your host institution is willing to cover big chunks. I mean, we are unfortunately not one of those, and, you know, we even, quite honestly, you know, we have to recover most of our salaries with the services. So, you know, and a subscription model would just simply not work. Yeah, but I guess all I want to say is there is no right way of running a facility, and this is what the survey showed as well. It is.
And it also depends on the number of users you have. So if you've got 70 users in your facility, subscription model actually could work quite well. Whereas if you've got, you know, 20, it may not.
Yes. All right. Okay. So thanks, Ben, very much for that. I mean, I hope you can all see my screen. Okay. So last part of the session and of the meeting. So I promise I hurry up and try to be quicker than 20 minutes. So it's all about what we call the multi-center testing initiative. And let me just you know, give you a bit of a background of what it means. So look, let me just start by saying, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here when I say, you know, that mass spec nowadays is, you know, that the method of choice to comprehensively analyze, quantify, characterize literally any biomolecule in any sample, you know, and we all work in core facilities, you know, we manage, direct them. So, you know, everyone is fully aware of that. Now, unfortunately, you know, this power of this technology of mass spec also comes at a price. And this price is normally that, you know, it's not easy. I mean, I'm always surprised by how many of our users really think that, like running a mass spec is like running a PCR machine, like you press a button and then something magical comes out. And, I mean, nothing could be further from the truth, right? I mean, so it's quite complex to run a mass spectrometer, and it's really difficult to run it well. And because of this complexity and because of this, intrinsic properties of the mass spectrometry, I mean, this actually leads to issues surrounding reproducibility. And, we all know this. I mean, if you take the same sample and you even run it on the same mass spec back to back, there is never, yes, you will of course get similar results, but not identical results. And these sources of irreproducibility, they come in from how do you prepare, the sample, which instrumentation do you use, how do you analyze it, which software package do you use? And so we all know this, that this, this is summarized here in this cloud diagram. Now, but exactly because of this, right? Exactly because different labs will get different results out of it. I mean, our stakeholders and researchers are often a bit worried about, so where should we go? Is really one lab as good as the other one? And exactly to preempt those kind of thoughts. So what has been done predominantly in Europe and the US are those, comparisons and benchmarking exercises where, this is really just a handful of them, but there are hundreds or dozens and hundreds of those benchmarking exercises, where the idea is, especially after, a new type of acquisition, has been developed, where the gist is you take a sample, you distribute it across different labs, they acquire the sample, report back the data, and you just see, do the different participating labs get the same results, or what are the differences, and to which degree do you see these differences? Now, I mean, those comparisons and benchmarking exercises are of course great. Don't get me wrong. The problem is, however, that unless you're Matthias Mann or Episode or Gigi, it's very rare that people tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, do you want to participate in one of those benchmarking exercises? And this is particularly true for rather small facilities, that have just 1 or 2 mass specs or just 1 or 2 staff members. They might not even have the capacity to participate in those benchmarking exercises. And this was exactly, so I mean, for those who attended the last Australasian Core Facility meeting in February, this was what we discussed then, right? So we had a big breakout session there, an entire session about answering the question pretty much, should we create our own Australian multi-center testing initiative, And I think you can remember we had these 6 breakout groups, and I thought it was a fantastic session, and it really gave a lot of insight of whether people would be interested in how we should approach this. And I'm not gonna summarize what the outcome of this, but I think the most important outcome of the question was, should we create our own multi-center testing initiative, was definitely yes. I think everybody was fully on board and thought it would be a great idea if we could have our own benchmarking initiative in Australia. And this is what we did. So at the end of the 3rd Australasian Core Facility meeting, Ben sent out a survey, and one of the questions was, well, I mean, are you really on board with the multi-center testing initiative? And if yes, would you maybe even be willing to be part of a steering committee? And we got quite a good number of responses. And so a big shout out to Belinda, Tara, Matt, and Mark, who really were all up for it into participating on a strategic level, operational, insight into the multi-center testing initiative, and you can call it steering committee and study coordinators. And we have been, quite busy over the last couple of weeks and months, just to talk about, well, I mean, what can we do? How can we roll out such a multi-center testing initiative in order to attract really many facilities, many people to participate, but also then at the end of the day to get something meaningful out, which would be useful for every participant involved. So and this is what we came up with. So taking all the all the breakout rooms and all the information we gathered into consideration, what was pretty clear is that for a first study that we want to roll out, we just wanted to have sort of like a pilot study, a really simple, easy to use study where many people can participate, where the number of samples that we gonna distribute is relatively small. And at the same time, we want to leave the participating facility a lot of flexibility, a lot of room to really test their own, workflows, their own, mass spectrometers, and we don't want to restrict the facilities of participants too much of what they can do and what they can't do. So, and what is actually simpler than actually just getting 2 samples? You can call them samples A and then sample B, and really just asking, well, what are the relative differences across these 2 samples? Now, we talked a lot about, well, whether we should go for proteomics, metabolomics, lipidomics, but I think, it's pretty fair to say that most of the facilities in the ANZ region are actually, or most of them offer definitely proteomic services, which is why we opted for proteomics initially. And so what we decided to do, so I'm gonna, basically talk you through what we want to do. And by the way, let me just preempt this. This is really something that will go ahead. So this is not something we might do, but after this meeting in the next couple of weeks, you will get an info package about this multi-center testing initiative and how you can participate and what the benefit of this is. So what we're going to do is the following. As I said, so we will have 2 samples, and we thought it would be best if these samples are being centrally prepared. Now, my lab facility, agreed to do this, so we're going to prepare these samples, and we're also going to do stability tests on these samples before and after lyophilization. Just we want to find out what's the best way of transporting and shipping these samples. Now, the composition, of course, we will not disclose what's in these samples. I mean, this is for you to figure out. But what I can disclose, it will be a complex peptide mixture of human origin with various distinct differences, right? So it can be few, it can be no differences, it can be a lot of differences. We're not going to disclose this. And as I said, so the exact composition is only known to us. So the idea is we prepare the sample, we lyophilize the sample, and whoever wants to participate, we're gonna ship the sample out. Now, we thought it would be really good, we want to provide really a significant amount of samples. So we've also been thinking of providing between 50 and 100 micrograms, which, I guess most of you, similar to us, probably inject like around 1 microgram per injection. So, this leaves you potentially with 100 plus injections. So this is more than enough to work with and to test your workflow. So you will get the samples alongside, just some simple reconstitution guidelines. I'm not going to go into this now, and also some sample acquisition guidelines. So, as I said, so I mean, once you receive the samples and you acquire them on the mass spec, we really want to give you all the freedom we can. So please feel free to use any hardware setup that you have available to analyze these samples, and please use any workflow method you want to use. However, having said that, we have to put a couple of restrictions in place. And one restriction is what we want to do is we want to initially just go for DDA. So I'm very sorry, Laura, no DRA passive at this stage. Just might come down the track. But we want to do it at this point in time. We want to just look for shotgun proteomics. Please apply your best shotgun proteomics method. We are going to cap the linear separation gradient to less than 2 hours. You can go less. You can go 30 minutes if you want, but at max use 2 hours separation gradient. Please don't do any pre-fractionation. And because we also want to do some, we want to get some idea about the quantitative accuracy, we would like to ask that every data set you produce is going to be acquired with technical triplicates. So each of the samples, please, inject 3 times. We're fully aware it's not as good as biological replicates, and by technical, replicates, we're basically just monitoring the performance of the mass spec. But I mean it is what it is. And we also would like to cap the amount, the injected amount of sample to 2 micrograms on the column, which pretty much restricts it to nanoflow. So we just want to get rid of all capped flow and analytical flow. Now, what we really want to do, and that's why we really try to send out as much material as we can, we would really like to strongly encourage all participants to run the samples on as many mass spectrometers with as many methods they can. I mean, this exercise is only worth it if we can really collect a lot of different data sets. And so please feel free to run, these things on as many mass specs with as many methods as you can. Now, what is going to happen? So once you acquire the methods, and we will give you enough time to acquire the files, don't worry about this. Please send the raw files back to me. So I'm the custodian of the mass spec raw files. By the way, when I say raw files, don't get confused. I'm not talking about the thermal file type, the raw files, but really, like whatever method you want to use. Just send me the raw files along with a sample of file submission template. So we have generated this template where we just collect metadata. Just send it to me, and you can consider me the custodian of these MathBit files. I will once I get all the files, I will de-identify them, and I will basically vow to store all files in accordance with our ISO 9001 accreditation, which certainly encompasses some data storage and data privacy guidelines. And I can really just assure you, because we get quite a few, we got quite a few questions about this. If you decide to participate, these files that you provide will not be used for any other purposes other than for this project, and they will never go into any public domain unless you really agree to this by written consent. Okay, so these data will come to us, we will identify them, and that's the end of it. So after we get all the raw data, actually we're gonna send the files to Mass Dynamics. So big thanks to Mass Dynamics for helping us out on that. So Mass Dynamics will basically get the MathBit files. They will run them through their standardized pipeline. Everybody, by the way, who will participate in this multi-center testing initiative will get an account. This is, so you can, what it means, probably Mark or Paula can talk a little bit more about this, but what it means that there are no fees involved, by the way. You can log into Mass Dynamics and you can interactively play with your data. You can see the quality control of your data set. And you can also anonymously compare your data set using the Mass Dynamics hardware infrastructure against the other data sets that have been provided. And of course, similar to us, Mass Dynamics will also store any data in accordance to their T's and C's. In addition, and this is really what I want to stress, despite Mass Dynamics kindly volunteer to really analyze the data for us and to provide unified reports, we strongly encourage you as well. This is mandatory. It's not mandatory. You don't have to do this, but we would really encourage you. Please take your data sets and also use your best in-house bioinformatics pipelines to analyze your own data. Again, the more data sets we get, the more accurate the results will be, and the more accurate we can predict. Are there good workflows or less good workflows? This is really important. So please analyze the data as well yourself and send me the results in form of a data summary template, which of course will be provided as well. And once I get all the data from Mass Dynamics, and once I get all the analyzed data from you guys, again, it's optional, it's not mandatory, I will compile it, send out, similar to the service, personalized de-identified reports to everyone who participated, and then most likely present it at the next ACF. So this is pretty much what we came up with. This is the idea of the first study we wanna roll out. So now, how to participate? Okay, so as I said, what is going to happen is that in the next few weeks, I will assemble an information package, which is basically a glorified way of saying it's a document that summarizes what I just said. This will be sent out to all of you, and probably even a bit further. If you want to participate, is registration required? So thanks, Matt, for putting up this registration sheet. Now, unfortunately, we can't do it for free. These prices that you see here is already subsidized by us as well. So we would just like to ask that everyone who wants to participate to pay $150, and this is really not to rip someone off. This is really just like we want to get cost neutral when it comes to the sample preparation and especially to shipping. We at this point in time we have no idea whether we have to ship on dry ice, whether we can ship by post. So $150 is I think a fairly cheap price to participate. Everything on top of that, so my involvement, the involvement of the steering committee, the involvement of Mass Dynamics, is everything included and can be considered as in-kind contributions. Now, this is really just a workflow, again, just driving home what we want to do. You will get an info package if you decide to participate. There's a link in there, just register. Once we know how many facilities, how many people wanna participate in this, in this multi-center testing initiative. We're going to prepare the samples, ship them to you. Please acquire them on as many mass specs and methods as you can. Provide the mass spec raw fuzz long metadata to me. I'm going to de-identify them and send them to Mass Dynamics for analysis. At the same time, you, so basically the participants, have access to Mass Dynamics as well to browse through your own data sets. But again, we strongly encourage you to analyze your data sets yourself. Provide the results to me. I will compile them together with the analyzed results from Mass Dynamics and then send out, as I said, individualized reports to all of you. Now, with regards to the timeline, it's, so we are here. We envision to send out the info package by the end of the month. Registration, because of Christmas time is in between, is open until around, February 2022. We give ourselves roughly 3 months to prepare the samples, to do all the stability testing, stuff like that. We'll aim to send the samples out by May 22. We'll give you roughly 3 months to acquire all the samples, on as many mass specs as you can and wish. And then we analyze it, compile the results, send out the reports, and hopefully by the 5th ACFM, which will be attached to law in 2023, we will then have the results of this first study of the multi-center testing initiative. Now, pretty much the penultimate slide is I just really want to talk about the benefits, because I think this is, I really want to drive home why people should participate in this and why I think this is, or why we think this is really good. I mean, there are certainly some community benefits, right? I mean, it would be very nice just to have a comparative benchmarking data set floating around, which showcase that Australasian core facilities, can produce robust data across the different facilities. It's going to be used to identify the best practice approaches and optimal strategies to at least analyze this particular sample types. What I really want to highlight, and this is really the idea we have. I mean, it depends a little bit on the uptake of this first study, but we really want to put in place a framework, a skeleton for future studies, right? I mean, so we just want to see how does it go, where do we hit the roadblocks, where are the challenges around this. But the idea is really, if this is successful, then we will go on and we'll probably send around more complicated sample types, maybe clinical samples. We might go to lipidomics, to metabolomics, or maybe even the analysis of PDMs and whatnot. Apart from the community benefits, I think there are also significant benefits for yourselves. For example, it's really I think it's a unique opportunity for everyone in Australia just to be able to compare your work anonymously to others in the area, to peers. We really want to avoid this becoming a competition. So that's why it will always stay anonymous. Nobody will be revealed who it is. But I mean, and it's really important. I think that also some facility, if you, let's say, you identify, okay, maybe I'm just getting half of the IT's other facilities. Maybe it's really it's just a good opportunity to maybe rethink the workflows and then try something new. And what I also want to mention here, and this is there will certainly be a prospect of publication. Now, let me just briefly, I know I'm going over time, but just one more minute. So what we mean here, I mean, the initial goal is really just to send out these data sets amongst ourselves for these, comparative benchmarking exercises. But we definitely want to aim high, and I think everyone in the steering committee is really keen on, if we get enough data sets back in, so we rely on you for that. But if we get enough data sets back, we certainly want to write it up, put it out, in form of a publication. Everyone who will submit data sets will automatically get an authorship. I think this is needless to say. This is also hopefully another incentive to participate. But at the same time, I really want to highlight, if you don't want to, if you don't want your data sets to be included, it's absolutely fine as well. Before we do anything with that, we're gonna request written consent that we can use your data in the publication. And whether the data sets will be uploaded to a public repository is this also a big question mark. Again, without consent, we won't do anything. And almost certainly with those kind of a publication, we can probably get away with not putting these data sets up to onto a public repository. Yeah, but look, but so far the benefits, this is what we have put in place. Just the last slide about acknowledgement, really, I mean, you know, I just had the privilege to present this here, but this is really a, you know, a concerted work from Belinda, Tara, Matt, Mark, and myself. And really thank you so much to Mass Dynamics, you know, for really helping us out. I think it's fantastic that Mass Dynamics, you know, provides their infrastructure and their bioinformatic pipelines to really try to help us and really try to get the maximum out for our facility. So thanks Paula, Mark, and Mass Dynamics for being so accommodating. And okay, so with this, I know we went over time, but I'm more than happy to take a few questions before we call it a day. So thanks so much.
Ralph, I had a question. What about iMobility data? So is it possible to use like FAMES or the timsTOF in passive mode, or what is the feeling?
To be honest, Laura, we haven't discussed iMobility, but I think yes, why not? Why not? Just go for it. Yes.
Yep.
I think, yeah, you know, we want to keep it simple, and that's why we didn't want to have the have the headache of dealing with DDA data, DIA data. So I think, but iMobility is fine. Yep. And I think we should also, but before really making a call on that, we probably should talk to Mark and Paula just about whether Mass Dynamics can take iMobility data, but I'm pretty sure they can. So.
Yeah, that would be fine. I don't think we're going to restrict. I don't think we should or need to restrict on that. So yeah, it's more about you acquiring how you as best as you could. So if that's what you use, if you use FAMES, great. If you use iMobility, then yeah, that's fine too.
Yep, great.
Okay, any more questions? Sorry, I didn't really read the chat. Was there anything in there? Mika, you still have your hand up from last time, or you have a question? Or maybe it's not there.
I think that was from last time, but certainly my only comment is, yeah, send me the samples. Well, I'm just a bit biased, but yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Look, then, okay with this. So as I said, the next step is really, you will get the information package, really have a think about if you want to participate. I think it's a great opportunity. It is really a community effort. You know, we will not get to a publication if we just collect 5 data sets. So the more you can provide, the better it is. And I think there's quite a few things at the end of the tunnel for, you know, quite a lot of benefit for everyone who wants to be involved. And look, if there are no more questions regarding that, then I would say, let's call it a day. Thanks so much, everyone, for spending the afternoon with us. I think we had some fantastic sessions. And well, I mean, I really hope you enjoyed it as well. Ben, anything to add from your side?
No, I think that's it. I've certainly enjoyed the afternoon a great deal. And yeah, I'd just like to add my thanks to everyone for turning up. I mean, obviously the whole aim for this is for you guys. And yeah, look forward to hopefully seeing some of you at Lawn and interacting through the initiatives as we go forward.
All right, fantastic, guys. Then talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Down to the hardcore few. Thanks, Ralph. I know went down well.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
See you, man.
Yeah, see you.
Yeah, no, I think it was good. I'm quite happy with how it went down.
Yep. Well, they turned up. They paid $20. Just had to go and charge Adam another $20 for the guy who sat through the whole thing.
Yeah, let's just see now how many people wanna take part of the of this initiative thing.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm optimistic. I think we'll get a good turnout. As I was saying to you the other day, I think the joy of charging that 150 is, I think that'll really bump up the data return. So if that wasn't there, then I think a lot of people would take the samples and then never get around to running them, whereas at least they've got a bit of skin in the game.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. There would be a cost level to, yeah, nice.
But the other part I'm interested in, because you're sending out quite a generous amount, I think we're going to run it through everything and do our own little in-house DIA versus DDA comparison, just to see for our own amusement as to how it stacks up.
I think it would be a good idea, right? Like, I've been thinking about that since Ralph and I were discussing this sample of, like, I've intended at the end of this year to benchmark all the machines and benchmark our methods and begin revising where we should all be at. Like, should we be doing DDA? Should we be doing DIA? Should we be high reverse phase fractionation, all the what? So this might be good for me as well, because then I can start as well. I'd be willing to share some of that information on what we get out of it with you too, Ben, like in terms of where we think what machine lies.
It'd be a fun one. Certainly get the vendors interested.
Yeah, tell Thermo we're going to run it on a Tim's top, and they might, actually, service an instrument when it's required.
No chance of that. Right. Well, I guess we've all got life to get back to, so I'll see you guys later.
Awesome, Ben. Thanks so much, and talk to you soon.
Yep. Cheers. Bye.
See you, man.